As Tom finished his report, Lewis had already opened the divorce agreement Kira had emailed him. His eyes flicked across the document, expression unreadable, until they landed on the property division clause. A rare flicker of surprise crossed his face. Tom, ever nosy, craned his neck to peek at the screen and snorted. She's really something. Says you can't touch any of her assets. What could you even take from her? Her unpaid student loan. Lewis ignored the jab. What else did you find? Tom straightened, his tone turning serious. Boss, she only found out about the marriage a few days ago. She went with her boyfriend to register and, bam, discovered she was already legally married. That's why she rushed to file this divorce. It doesn't look premeditated. He paused, then added with suspicion, but something feels off. We started digging into her past, and after she left the Olsen family, it's like she vanished. No credit activity, no employment history, no medical records. It's like she erased herself. Lewis narrowed his eyes. You think she's involved? Tom nodded. I do. I just don't know how yet. What else? Tom scratched his head awkwardly. It's been 2 years since we were constantly on the move. I haven't found anything concrete. We may have to wait until old Mrs. Horton's memory returns. Lewis glanced at him coolly. Tom quickly dipped his head. We'll keep digging. I swear. Without a word, Lewis printed 2 copies of the agreement and stood up. Any luck contacting Nora? Nora, the elusive scientist rumored to be close to a breakthrough Alzheimer's drug. Lewis wanted the drug for one person, his grandmother. Tom sighed. She's hard to find. Major biotech companies are on her tail, so she's gone completely underground. Lewis didn't reply, but his displeasure was palpable. I'll find her, Tom promised, lowering his voice. Whatever it takes. Kira had just finished dinner with the old lady when her phone buzzed with a WhatsApp message. Lewis, I'm downstairs. Come out. She made a casual excuse about throwing out the trash and stepped outside. The black Bentley was waiting. Kira got in without a word. Lewis handed her the divorce papers. I have no objections, he said coolly. Sign. He watched her, fully expecting hesitation, excuses, or drama. But Kira didn't even blink. She signed both copies quickly and passed the back. Can we get it finalized tomorrow? Lewis arched a brow. In such a rush? Very, she replied. My company's going public. A clean marital status looks better to investors. There was a pause. Then he said, fine. Tomorrow morning, she added. Bring your ID, household registration book, and the marriage certificate. Civil Affairs Bureau at 10. He nodded. But before another word could be said, a fragile voice broke the silence. You're getting a divorce? Old Mrs. Horton was at the doorway, clutching her chest, face pale with shock. Grandma. She swayed on her feet and collapsed. Outside the VIP ward, First City Hospital. The patient is stable. For now, the doctor said gravely. But she must not suffer emotional shocks again. No distress, no surprises. Understood. Kira stood stiffly, still shaken by what had just happened. Next to her, Lewis seemed like stone, calm and composed. But the moment the doctor said, out of danger, she saw his hands tremble ever so slightly. He tugged at his collar, sat down on the bench, and leaned forward, head bowed between his clasped hands. Mrs. Horton is awake, a nurse called out. Lewis was already on his feet. When Kira stepped into the ward, the old lady's eyes were open. Her voice was hoarse but steady. Granddaughter-in-law, I had a terrible dream. You and that brat were getting divorced. That's not true, is it? Kira hesitated, remembering the doctor's warning. Lewis answered for her. It's not true. So, you're not getting divorced? We're not. Then give me your household registration and marriage certificate. I want to see them. All right. Lewis didn't even blink. He would agree to anything she asked. The old lady turned to Kira. It's true, isn't it? Kira nodded. Yes. The old woman sighed in relief. Good. Later that night, Kira sat on the sofa in the ward, scrolling through her phone. She wasn't actually reading messages. She was reviewing a document, one related to clinical trials for Alzheimer's drug therapy. A specific technical roadblock in the final testing phase still plagued her research. She needed access to classified biomedical literature. Then a message popped up on WhatsApp. Puppy, Miss Olson, let's postpone the divorce until Grandma recovers. Kira stared at the screen. She could say no. The agreement was signed. The marriage was still legal on paper, but it wouldn't affect her IPO. A delay wouldn't hurt. Kira, okay. A few seconds later, Louis checked his phone. Louis, do you have any other requests? Kira, just one. Once she's better, let's finalize the divorce right away. Louis frowned at the screen, his expression unreadable. She was proving harder to figure out than he thought. From the hospital bed, old Mrs. Horton looked at the pair, sensing the growing coldness between them. This wouldn't do. She suddenly perked up. Brad, I'm assigning your wife to a position in Horton Group. Louis raised a brow. Now, yes, you two need to spend time together. You'll grow closer that way. Louis hesitated, then said, all right. The old lady smiled. Great. Tomorrow, she starts. Kira blinked. Okay. She thought of something. Horton Group had one of the largest private biomedical archives in Ocean Ion. Maybe, just maybe, she'd find the research she needed there. Later, in the hallway, Tom fell and stepped beside Louis, whispering, so that's why she was so quick to sign. She brought your grandma downstairs on purpose. Smart move. There was never going to be a divorce. He smirked. Now she's even getting a job in your company. Don't you think it's all too convenient? Louis didn't answer immediately. Then his voice dropped to a low, calm warning. If I don't keep her close, how will I uncover her intentions? His eyes darkened. I want to know everything. Back in the ward, Kira stretched out on the couch, thinking about her access to Horton's data systems. She closed her eyes, but then, granddaughter-in-law, the old lady whispered. Let me tell you a little secret. Kira opened her eyes. What kind of secret? The old woman smiled faintly. Had she remembered something from the past? Something important? Kira was hoping the old lady would reveal something important. How did she know her in the first place? And more importantly, how had she ended up married to Louis Horton? She leaned forward slightly, curiosity in her eyes. Grandma, what's the secret? The old lady lowered her voice dramatically, eyes sparkling with mischief. I'm going to tell you that brat's fatal weakness. Use it if he ever dares bully you. Kira froze. That was not what she had in mind. Still, the old woman looked so excited that Kira didn't have the heart to stop her. Don't let his icy face fool you, the old lady whispered. That arrogant, 6-foot-tall man is terrified of cats. Kira blinked. Her mind flashed back to a boy from her childhood, also scared of cats. It couldn't be, could it? Still, she didn't press it. I prefer dogs. She used to like cats. But when that boy said he hated them, she eventually stopped liking them too. The next morning, top floor, Horton Group HQ. Woof, woof. A small, fluffy Shiba Inu bounded around Kira's feet, tail wagging like a metronome. Tom stared at the sight, utterly dumbfounded. Miss Olson's new role is dog sitter? Louis was silent. Old Mrs. Horton's orders were law in the Horton family. And apparently, the puppy was now Kira's full-time responsibility. Tom muttered under his breath. Guess old folks really do turn into children. Louis's expression didn't change. Take them both to the new Energy R&D division. Team 1. She starts on boarding today. Tom blinked. With the dog? Louis gave him a look. Got it, Tom said, picking up the Shiba Inu. Moving out. As they walked, Kira casually asked, Does this puppy have a name? Nope, Tom replied. Old Mrs. Horton said you should name it. Kira turned to look at the expressionless Louis and smirked. Let's call it Kitten. Tom choked. You're naming a dog Kitten? Is there a problem? No. 38th floor, new Energy R&D division. The elevator doors opened to reveal a sleek, modern floor split into two teams. Team 1 and Team 2, with a communal lounge in the middle. Just as Kira stepped out, a group of engineers nearby were whispering. I heard her getting a gorgeous new intern today. Finally, I candy in the lab. Someone from Team 2 sneered. I heard she's just an undergrad. They're sending us a pretty face, not a brain. Team 1 immediately shot in glares. Before things got heated, a sharp voice interrupted. Enough chatter. Get back to work. The speaker was Jalen Riley, head of Team 1. Tall, sharp-featured, and with a permanent look of irritation, He exuded the kind of confidence that came from real skill. His gaze landed on Kira and immediately darkened. "Mr. Davis," he said flatly, "why are you bringing an inexperienced undergraduate into my team?" Tom smiled. "Boss's orders." Jalen frowned. "I don't care who sent her. This isn't daycare. And no dogs in the lab." Kira met his gaze without flinching. "Understood." Only then did Jalen gesture toward a corner office. As she walked away, Jalen muttered to Tom, "Let this be the last time. If my cousin manages to get Drive South on board, he could send me 1,000 interns like her, and I wouldn't complain. Until then, spare me the nepotism." Kira's first day. No one assigned her any tasks. No one asked her anything. She quietly played with Kitten, who soon fell asleep in a sunlit corner of her office. Once the dog was settled, she got up and made her way toward the R&D department's internal data library. That drug, if she could find even one usable biomedical paper, she might make progress. She had to help the old lady. She approached a scholarly-looking man in glasses. "Excuse me, I need access to the data library. Can you point me in the right direction?" The man blushed and opened his mouth, only to be cut off by another voice. "What do you need in the data library?" "Jalen." Kira turned, meeting his scowl. "I want to do some research." Jalen let out a short, derisive laugh. "Research? You? That's cute. Do you think you're qualified to access restricted material? We store global-level technical data in that library." "I didn't realize there was a problem with trying to learn." "You want to learn? Learn the basics first. This is advanced work, not a college lecture." Kira bit her tongue, pulling out her phone. If Lewis gave her clearance, she could bypass this. But before she could type, Jalen barked, "Don't bother. Pulling strings won't help. I don't care whose puppet you are. If you're on my team, you do things my way." The scholarly man suddenly spoke up. Actually, she graduated from Ocean Ion University. Her academic performance was very good. Jalen scoffed. "Grades? Textbooks? Meaningless. Everyone starts at the bottom. Watch and learn. That's the rule here." He snatched a thick project binder from the nearest desk and tossed it to her. "This is our latest new energy initiative. Let's see if you can even make sense of the first 5 pages." Kira caught the binder, calmly flipping through the pages at a rapid pace. Jalen's sneer widened. "What? Try to impress me with fast flipping? You think you drive south now? If you can't understand it, save yourself the humiliation and return to your little dog." Kira snapped the binder shut and looked up, her voice icy. "Who says I don't understand it?"
Hey, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy our audiobooks, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, feel free to share your review in the comments section below.
Jalen was taken aback. "Can you understand it?" Just as Kira was about to reply, the introverted male colleague jumped in. "Jalen, I think she's telling the truth." Jalen glared at him. "Do you two know each other?" The colleague gave a shy smile. "I was a graduate student under Professor Miller at Ocean Ion University. I was still a student last year when she joined us to work on a research project led by Professor Miller." Kira studied his face, trying to recall. "Luca Barker?" Luca blushed and nodded, explaining to Jalen, "She's the only undergraduate student that Professor Miller recruited for the project. She's a fast reader, and she has experience with these fundamental frameworks." But Jalen still looked at her disapprovingly. "It's just the basics. There's no need to be so proud, just because you understand it. If you're so capable, solve the core technology issues then." Luca immediately chimed in. "Boss, you are asking too much of her." Jalen sneered. "If you don't have what it takes, just do as you're told. Go to the resource library and look up the most basic things. You should be ashamed of yourself." With that, he left. Luca sighed and explained to Kira, "We've been stuck on the core technology issues for a while. Jalen hasn't been sleeping well for a few days, so he's a bit grumpy. But he's not a bad person. Don't take his words to heart." Kira wasn't bothered. She didn't come to the Horton Group to make enemies. She asked for the location of the resource library and headed straight there. The Horton Group's resource library was located on the 60th floor. It was essentially a large private library, only accessible to employees of the group. The books here covered knowledge from various industries, including scientific research materials that weren't accessible outside. Kira was slightly excited. Her intuition told her that she would find what she was looking for here. Top floor. Lewis was dealing with several backlog files when his phone rang. It was a WhatsApp message from old Mrs. Horton, whose ID was blooming. Prosperity. Brat, you need to have lunch with your wife today. Remember to send me a photo of you two dining together. Lewis frowned. Just as he was about to make an excuse about having a meeting, he saw Grandma's WhatsApp nickname change from Blooming Prosperity to Fragile Grandma, do not agitate. Lewis was speechless. After staring at the nickname for a while, he ultimately sighed in resignation and pressed the call bell on his desk. Tom quickly stepped in. Boss, what can I do for you? Prepare 2 lunch sets and bring them here. Sure. Lewis then sent a message to Need Iron, telling her to join him for lunch on the penthouse floor. However, by the time the lunch was set up on the nearby table, Kira still hadn't responded to his message. Lewis stood up. Where is she? Tom said. Miss Olson? She's in the resource library. Lewis made his way to the 60th floor and began to search for her amidst the rows of bookshelves. He soon saw her and Jake, who was staring at her. Kira was engrossed in looking through books and didn't feel her phone vibrating. The library had the most advanced technological resources, and she was captivated by it. She was so engrossed in the books that she accidentally backed into someone. Sorry. When Kira turned around, she saw a familiar face. Jake was glaring at her with mixed emotions. Kira, you've been going out of your way to please great-grandma. Is it to get close to my uncle? Kira's face darkened instantly. It's none of your business. But Jake continued. My uncle has steered clear of women all these years. Don't think that by relying on your looks, you can get to him. He's not that superficial. Right now, he's just getting you out of his way by giving you a redundant job. Kira scoffed. So, you're saying that you courted me for so long because you were superficial? Jake was taken aback. Kira looked at the man in front of her. He was her only friend in college. She had seriously considered becoming his girlfriend and even wondered if she should accept his advances when he hinted that he had a surprise for her at the graduation ceremony. She didn't expect things to turn out like this. She sighed. Jake, can't we part on good terms? No. Jake was suddenly agitated. I know you hate me for proposing to Isla, but I had no choice. There are many aspects to consider in an alliance between wealthy families. I have fought for you before. My mother even agreed to let me be with an ordinary person. But your status, no matter what happens, I can't marry an illegitimate daughter. Otherwise, how can I face the Horton family in the future? I'll become the laughingstock of Ocean Ion. Kira looked at him. As a child, she felt she couldn't hold her head up high because of her status. But since she left the Olsons, she understood that self-respect mattered more. She looked away. Thank you for not marrying me. As she tried to leave, Jake blocked her path. I heard that you were given a hard time by Jalen in Group 1. I can arrange for you to join Group 2. I'm in charge there, and I can get capable people to guide you. I know you're a competitive person, and you're so clever that you'll learn quickly. Soon, you'll be able to stand on your own and won't have to take on odd jobs again. Kira interrupted his babbling. What's your term? Divorce your husband and be my woman. Jake couldn't stand the idea of sharing her with another man. Every time he thought about it, he felt like he was going insane. Kira coldly retorted, You're not worthy. Why? Do you love your hooligan husband that much? Do you believe me if I told you that I could let him abandon you with just some money or a threat? How can he be better than me? Burning with rage, Jake grabbed Kira's wrist and slammed her against the bookshelf. His eyes turned red. Or is it that you women are just like that? You slept with him, and you can't leave him now. Is that it? If that's the case, then let's see who's better, me or him. With that, he suddenly leaned forward and kissed her forcefully. At the far end of the bookshelf, Lewis stood there. He had heard everything. As he saw Jake's inappropriate advances, his face turned livid, and he was about to step forward. However, the petite woman suddenly kneed Jake hard between his legs. As he stepped back from the pain, she slapped him without hesitation. Smack! After slapping him, Kira was still angry, and she looked at him coldly. I didn't want to hurt your pride, but since you insist on delving into it, let me tell you something. My husband is taller than you, more handsome than you, and has much better stamina than you. Unlike you, who can't even withstand me pushing you away. You should exercise more when you have the time." After saying this, she turned to leave, only to see Lewis in the corner ahead. Kira was dumbfounded. Lewis remained silent. At that moment, Jake, doubled over in pain, shouted out angrily, "What use is his stamina? I can toy with you as I please in the company, but your husband can't do anything." At his words, a male voice came in. "Who said he can't do anything?" Everyone turned their heads in unison, looking at the person who was speaking. It was Jalen. He had dark circles under his eyes, and his face was full of irritation. Jake looked shocked. "You're her husband?" "Of course not," Jalen sneered. "If her husband were a real man and knew you were bullying her here, he'd definitely come to fight you. How could he possibly stand by and do nothing?" Jake was speechless. He forced himself to stand up despite the pain, glaring at Jalen. "I want to transfer her to my group." "No way," Jalen firmly said. "People on my team aren't under your control." His arrogance was still the same, but in Kira's eyes, it was now more acceptable. Jake asked in confusion, "She's here because of nepotism. Don't you hate such things the most?" Jalen smirked. "Why do you have to mock her? She's just a small employee, and you, a college graduate, are the leader of the second team. Who are you to talk about nepotism?" Jake was so frustrated by him that he ground his teeth. "It's not the same. I'm the legitimate grandson of the first branch of the Horton family." "Right. The most frequent nepotism users in the Horton group." Jake took a deep breath, then suddenly said, "In a few days, Drive South will come to my research team." "Jalen, isn't he your idol? As long as you don't interfere with this matter, I can introduce you to him." Jalen fell silent. Among this group of people researching new energy, everyone's idol was Drive South. Jalen had long read Drive South's published papers over and over again, and the more he read, the more he realized how amazing Drive South was. He had been looking for various channels, trying to find a way to meet Drive South. Jake was actually threatening him with that. Jalen hesitated for a second out of respect for Drive South, then said, "No." He looked at Kira. "Stop embarrassing yourself here. Come with me." Kira looked in the direction where Lewis had just been, only to find that he had left at some point. She silently breathed a sigh of relief. Luckily, he had left, otherwise her comment about good stamina would be too awkward. She followed along Jalen out of the data center. Jalen frowned with displeasure. "It's all because of you. I missed the chance to meet Drive South." But Kira smiled. "There will be other opportunities." Jalen scolded her again. "You're a college student. Can't you just stay in the office obediently? Why did you go there and make a fool of yourself?" Kira didn't argue anymore. What Lucas said was right. He might have a foul mouth, but he's actually a good person. Jake still stood there with a gloomy look in his eyes. He clenched his fists. One day, he would make Kira sob and beg him to take her. He took a deep breath, waited until the pain in his body subsided a bit, then called Isla. "You have a lunch appointment with Drive South tomorrow afternoon, right? Take me with you." Kira and Jalen returned to the first team of the R&D department. Only then did she see the message on WhatsApp. She used the excuse of going to lunch and went to the top floor into Lewis's office. Lewis was dressed in a white shirt and black suit, looking very gentlemanly. Without raising his head, he pointed to the dining table next to him. "That's your lunch." Kira was still a little uneasy. With his current demeanor, he shouldn't have heard what she said earlier, right? Just as she was thinking, she heard the sound of a camera shutter from a phone. After Lewis casually finished taking a photo and sent it to Fragile Grandma, "Do not agitate," on WhatsApp, he came over. Knowing the purpose of his photo, Kira didn't ask any more questions. She just looked at the dining table to look for something to say. "Mr. Horton, what a hearty lunch." "Yes." Lewis took off his jacket, rolled up his sleeves, sat down elegantly opposite her, and said, "Only by keeping up with nutrition can we have good stamina." Kira was speechless. Her cheeks felt a bit hot. She glanced at his muscular forearm that was exposed, then she packed some of the food. "Mr. Horton, I just remembered I haven't fed Kitten yet. I'll take my leave first." She picked up the container. "Thank you for the lunch." Lewis's face stiffened for a moment. Kira was delighted. The first team of the R&D department. Jalen was eating his takeaway with a bitter face, thinking about what he had witnessed today. At first, he thought that the undergraduate student was overreaching, but now wondered if she was working hard because she had been mistreated by Jake. He thought about the demands Jake made and found them indeed quite humiliating. No wonder she was eager to learn more. Unfortunately, haste made waste. She hadn't even built a solid foundation, so even if she saw those profound materials, she wouldn't understand. He got up and walked to Luca, whispering, "Find something for the undergraduate to do in the afternoon. Give her some pointers." Luca blinked. "Sure." Jalen looked a bit awkward and said in a fierce tone, "That'll stop her from running around and causing us trouble." Luca didn't know what to say. Thus, when Kira wanted to go to the data center again in the afternoon, she was stopped by Luca. "Jalen said we don't keep idle people. You have to finish your work before you can go to the data center to study." He arranged for her some basic work that was already completed. Without a clear research process, sorting out these things was very troublesome, but a newbie could learn a lot from it. Luca felt that it should take a month or even more to sort out these things. But to his surprise, Kira handed in her work half an hour later. Luca didn't know what to say. He checked the work and found it was actually better than what they had done. Kira asked modestly, "Is there any other work to do? If not, I'll go to the data center." What else could Luca arrange at the moment? There were still a lot of things he didn't understand. He gritted his teeth and handed her his own work. The module he was responsible for was something he had been working on for a week and hadn't yet completed. Although it was a bit difficult, the undergrad seemed to grasp the basics very well. He decided to let her struggle a bit with the more profound things, and she would realize the reality and obediently follow their learning path, right? But an hour later, Kira handed in her work again. Finished. Luca was stunned. He looked at the email in his inbox and was shocked to find the technical point where he had been stuck was solved by her effortlessly. Luca went to find Jalen. Jalen pondered. "The point you were stuck on was you overcomplicating things. The undergrad was just lucky to have found another way to solve it. Let her handle some harder work. Luca, in that case, we'll have to let her solve our prime technical problem." This problem had been troubling Jalen for a month. Jalen said, "Give it to her." Anyway, it was just to keep her here and not run around. Let her see what a real scientific research problem is. So, Luca ruthlessly handed over the key technical problem that had been troubling the entire first team to Kira. The technical core of the research and development department was a challenging task. It took Kira a full 2 hours to solve this problem. She sent an email to Luca and went out to find him. But Luca stood up, began to pack his things, and looked very happy. Time to clock off. Friday afternoon was the happiest time for each employee. Finally, it was time to welcome the weekend. After Luca finished speaking, he finally noticed Kira. "How's your work coming along, Junior?" Kira started to speak. "No rush." Luca interrupted her excitedly. "Take the weekend off. Whatever it is, leave it till Monday." Kira didn't say anything else. Although she didn't work that much, she understood that discussing work when work was over on Friday could be very annoying. It was better not to disturb her senior's weekend. The task she finished, after all, was just a small problem in the research and development department. Luca took his backpack and walked out. When he passed by Kira, he paused and comforted her. "Don't get upset. You've actually done great." Kira didn't know what he was talking about. She didn't have to work, and she only helped out because Jalen helped her out today. Since the work was done, she would go to the documentation department when she came to work next week. While thinking about this, Kira went back to her office, picked up Kitten, and also left. On the rooftop, after Louis finished his work for the day, he checked the time and prepared to go home. But Tom asked, "Boss, where are you going?" Louis paused, only then realizing he hadn't asked where his grandmother was. He dialed old Mrs. Horton's number. "Are you at someone's house?" The answer old Mrs. Horton gave was unexpectedly, "I'm at the hospital." Louis frowned. "Didn't the doctor say you could be discharged? But I suddenly felt a pain in my chest this afternoon, so I wanted to stay a few more days." "Are you coming to stay with me tonight, Brat?" "It's okay if you don't think you can make it. I'm just an old lady nobody loves. Let me stay in the hospital alone. There's nobody around when I wake up in the middle of the night wanting a drink of water. I am on my way there." That's more like it. By the way, I told my granddaughter-in-law, and she's also coming. You should come with her. He hung up the phone and rubbed his temple. Of course, he understood his grandmother's cunning plan. Whether she returns to the Horton house or stays in the Olsen house, he and Kira always split up at night. But at the hospital, the two had to care for her at all times, and they would get to spend more time together. But she had a boyfriend. Louis slightly pursed his lips. He wanted to keep his distance from her. Then he thought of his grandmother's health, so he reluctantly texted her on WhatsApp. I'll pick you up from work. We're going to the hospital. She replied quickly this time. Don't bother. I'm already on the way there by taxi. She didn't know how to avoid suspicion. She hadn't stuck around without knowing her limits because of grandmother's favoritism. Louis should feel happy, but for some reason, he was even more displeased. Kira didn't think much of it. She just didn't want to get involved with Louis too much before finding out the truth about their marriage. The inexplicable marriage must have been due to some trouble caused by Louis. After all, who would even notice her, a weak and helpless woman? She carried the dog and walked straight into the building, heading toward the VIP ward. Not far from there, Mrs. Olsen and Isla had just finished a re-examination. Isla was supporting her mother by the arm, and the two of them were looking in the direction where Kira was leaving. Mrs. Olsen hesitated and said, "Is that Kira? Why is she in hospital? Is she sick?" Isla felt a twinge of annoyance. Old Mrs. Horton was hospitalized, and the news couldn't be kept from the Horton family. But the old lady was stubborn and didn't let anyone visit her. Isla also went to the room today, but she was turned away at the door, and she didn't see anyone. So, Kira must be there to visit the old lady right now. Isla's eyes darted around. She must be visiting old Mrs. Horton. Kira is so kind. As soon as these words came out, the nanny, Aunt South, who had come along, was unhappy. She's kind? I haven't seen her visit Mrs. Olsen. Aunt South was in her 50s, about 10 years older than Jody South, and she had been looking after Mrs. Olsen for many years. She was still single. Mrs. Olsen treated Aunt South like her sister, and therefore Aunt South was a respected figure in the Olsen family. Even Isla treated Aunt South with great respect. Mrs. Olsen looked a little desolate when she heard that. Kira had a hard life in the Olsens. Aunt South immediately said, "Mrs. Olsen, you're still speaking up for her." One also looked down upon Poppy Hill's petty manners, but she was right. Miss Kira is an ungrateful wretch. You've always looked out for her and care about her, but she may have forgotten you. Isla said, I heard Mr. Horton gave her a job in the Horton Group, so she must be repaying old Mrs. Horton's kindness, right? Aunt South sneered. But Mrs. Olsen brought her up. When Poppy abandoned her during her childhood, it was Mrs. Olsen who fed her and sent her to school, and Mrs. Olsen has done everything for her. Isn't she going to repay that? Mrs. Olsen immediately stopped her. Enough. Stop it. But Isla continued. Mother is kind. She helped others without asking for anything in return. However, some people know the meaning of kindness, such as Drive South. My mother only sponsored him a little money for school, and he helped our family so much over the years. 3 years ago, the company was almost bankrupt, and he gave us a technology patent, which saved us. Aunt South also nodded. Drive South is way better than Kira. I don't know what Drive South looks like, but one's appearance is decided by their personality. I'm sure he's good looking. Isla immediately feigned curiosity. I'm also keen on knowing what kind of person Drive South is. Mother, take me with you tomorrow. Mrs. Olsen chuckled and tapped Isla on her nose. Okay, I'll take you. They were talking and going downstairs to the parking lot. Kira saw them from the VIP ward. She was currently sitting on the sofa next to the bed. Her gaze followed Mrs. Olsen. She could see that Mrs. Olsen's face was pale, and she was as thin and straight as bamboo. Still, she exuded an indescribable charm. Isla was saying something to her, and Mrs. Olsen nodded in resignation. The mother and daughter were intimate. Once the car left, Kira turned back reluctantly. She found the little old lady standing behind her. Who's that? She looked so familiar. With a gentle look on her face, Kira was about to speak. You two look so much alike, old Mrs. Horton's eyes suddenly lit up. I remember. She's your mother. Look alike? Kira Olsen was slightly taken aback. Actually, aside from their similar oval faces, her features were different from Mrs. Olsen's. Mrs. Olsen had a pair of phoenix eyes, while she had the amorous eyes. If they looked similar, it was probably because they both carried a similar kind of cold aura at first glance, which was normal. After all, when she had just left the Olsen family, she would often think about how Mrs. Olsen would handle the difficulties she faced. She emulated Mrs. Olsen's way of behaving in society, and it was not surprising that she had unconsciously acquired some of her vibes. Kira Olsen looked at the old woman. "Grandma, she is not my mother." But the old woman was adamant. "She is. My granddaughter-in-law, how could you disown your mother?" Kira Olsen was at a loss whether to laugh or cry. The old woman was having one of her moments again. Fortunately, at that moment, Lewis Horton showed up at the door of the ward with packed dinner, and the old woman stopped perseverating. The dinner Lewis Horton had prepared was quite lavish. In addition to some light meals, there were fruits enough for 3 people. But the old woman immediately frowned. "My granddaughter-in-law can't eat mangoes. She's allergic to them." Kira Olsen was slightly stunned. She looked at the old woman in bewilderment. "Grandma, how do you know that?" She did indeed used to be allergic to mangoes, but after improving her physical conditions 2 years ago, she outgrew the allergy. Therefore, she never told the old woman about this. The old woman chuckled. "You told me about it before, saying that as soon as you ate mangoes, your face was covered with small red bumps." Kira Olsen became serious. "When was this before?" But the old woman was confused again. "It seems to be before the wedding." "Yes, you told me before the wedding." But Kira Olsen was certain that she didn't even know the old woman at that time. And she didn't have amnesia. She quickly asked, "Did anything else come to your mind? Like how Mr. Horton and I got our marriage certificate?" The old woman shook her head. "I can't remember." It seemed that the old woman needed a specific environment to occasionally remember anything. While Kira Olsen was deep in thought, she suddenly sensed an analytical gaze on her. She turned her head and met Lewis Horton's deep gaze. The man was expressionless, clearly having understood what the old woman had said, giving him the impression that she was manipulative again. She really felt that she was being unjustly accused. Kira Olsen suddenly picked up the dog and said, "Grandma, you two start eating first. I will take the dog for a walk." After saying this, she went out of the room. She didn't go far. She just stopped at the end of the corridor, holding the dog and leaning against the wall, her lush, amorous eyes watching the old woman's ward. As expected, a tall figure followed her out not long after. When Lewis Horton saw her, he slowly walked over. His deep voice sounded, "Miss Olsen, do you have something to say?" Kira Olsen pursed her lips. "I thought you might want an explanation." "Does Miss Olsen have anything she wants to explain?" Kira Olsen said earnestly, "I really don't know what the grandma meant when she mentioned the things before the wedding. Even she found it inconceivable to say these things. After all, mango allergy belonged to her personal privacy, something that the old woman couldn't have fabricated." She thought the man would question her, but to her surprise, he calmly responded with a single word, "Oh." Kira Olsen was baffled by his attitude. "Mr. Horton, do you believe me?" "I don't know." "Kira Olsen." Lewis Horton suddenly stepped closer. Because of his natural height difference, Kira Olsen had a feeling that she was being condescendingly looked down upon by him. He slowly said, "Miss Olsen, regardless of your motives, if you can keep Grandma happy, I promise I can protect you." Kira Olsen suddenly understood his thoughts. This man didn't care about the truth at all. He didn't care whether she was lying. He was very powerful, having the power to dominate an ocean ion, and not afraid of any plots. He only cared about the old woman. Even if she was scheming something, as long as she could make the old woman happy, this man might be willing to turn a blind eye. Of course. All of a sudden, the man's aura shifted. "If you hurt Grandma, I will make it impossible for you to stay in Ocean Ion." Kira Olsen responded more to coaxing than pressure. She sneered, "Mr. Horton, aren't you doing that already?" Lewis Horton frowned. He was about to say something when a hearty voice came over. "Kira Olsen?" Kira Olson turned her head to see Professor Miller. He must have gotten a cold. His voice was a bit hoarse. After he walked over, he directly said, "I was about to call you and ask if you got a job. Was the misunderstanding between you and Mr. Horton resolved? Mr. Horton is really not manly enough, is he? Picking on a girl like you, not only canceling your postgraduate recommendation, but also threatening to make you disappear from Ocean Ion." Lewis Horton. Kira Olson glanced at Lewis Horton with a sardonic smile. "Professor, don't worry. The misunderstanding has been resolved. Mr. Horton is quite nice. He got me a job and even promised to protect me." The mockingly sarcastic tone made Lewis Horton's expression darken. Professor Miller sighed with relief, and it was only then that he noticed Lewis Horton. Seeing the two of them so close, he thought of the conversation between Isla Olson and Poppy Hill last time, and instinctively asked, "Is this your gangster husband?" Lewis Horton. His face darkened further. The smile on the corners of Kira Olson's lips brightened a bit. "Well, sort of." Professor Miller then looked at Lewis Horton very seriously. "Young man, you're strong and handsome. You should work hard to find a decent job." Olson Mansion. The entire family was having lunch in the dining room. Mrs. Olson didn't look well, and she seemed to have no appetite. Taylor Olson immediately expressed his concern. "Shirley, what's wrong? Are you not feeling well?" Mrs. Olson waved him off. Isla Olson then said, "Dad, we ran into Kira in the hospital today. Mom must be worried about her." Taylor Olson frowned. "Why worry about her?" Isla Olson sighed. "She definitely hates me now, blaming me for her expulsion from school and for forcing her to go abroad. I'm worried that she'll say something in front of old Mrs. Horton, and Mr. Horton will vent his anger on me." Taylor Olson sneered. "That's because she offended Mr. Horton. What does it have to do with you? Even if she saved old Mrs. Horton's life, it's their business. As a matter of fact, it was Mr. Horton who ordered us to discipline our daughter well." Isla Olson looked stiff. She clearly remembered the incident in which she intentionally mentioned that Mr. Horton had left a message. That should be over by now, right? She was always acutely aware that her father, Taylor Olson's kindness towards her, was solely because she was Mrs. Olson's daughter. If he knew that she had displeased Mr. Horton, the consequences would be unimaginable. But just then, Taylor Olson's phone rang. He picked it up. "Mr. Davis? Why did you call me? Does Mr. Horton have any instructions?" Upon hearing this, Isla Olson felt her heart sink. It shouldn't be what she thought, right? She was panicked. Tom's voice came through the phone. "Mr. Horton asked me to ask Miss Isla Olson, when did my boss say he wanted to make Miss Kira Olson disappear from Ocean Ion? How come even my boss doesn't know that?" Taylor's face stiffened, and he looked at Isla in disbelief. Isla's face instantly turned pale. Taylor laughed awkwardly and apologized to Tom, who finally left a comment saying the Olson family really needs to teach their daughter a lesson before hanging up. Taylor then glared at Isla. Isla lowered her head and cried. "When I saw Kira clinging to Mr. Horton, I was afraid she'd affect my marriage with Jake, and I was even more afraid that the Horton family would look down on me. Dad, I didn't mean to. That's no excuse to act in Mr. Horton's name," Taylor said angrily. Isla clenched her fists, her eyes flickering. She sobbed, "Dad, after all, Kira is also your daughter. I was afraid you wouldn't be able to scold her." "Nonsense." As expected, Taylor changed the topic. "How many times have I told you? In my heart, I only have one daughter, and that's you. How can Kira compare with you?" Mrs. Olson disagreed. "Taylor, don't say that. Kira is your daughter no matter what." Taylor immediately turned around. "Shirley, after all these years, don't you understand? I did a terrible thing to you when I was tricked by Poppy Hill. I'll never acknowledge her or her daughter. In my heart, only you and our daughter are my family." Poppy, who was serving as a housemaid standing at the side, clenched her fists in resentment when she heard this. She looked at Taylor with a bitter expression. He was the man she deeply loved and the neighbor she grew up with as a childhood friend. Yet this man only had eyes for Jody South. Back then, after Poppy got pregnant, she went to him with the pregnancy test, saying she could be his mistress, but he mercilessly drove her away. saying he wouldn't betray his wife. Poppy had no other choice but to go to Jody, and only barely managed to stay in the Olsen family after making a scene. For so many years, Taylor had never shown her any affection, and he treated Kira as if she were nothing. Fortunately for Poppy, she had switched the two children. Poppy lowered her head, barely holding back the smirk in her eyes. Taylor would never know that the daughter he claimed to have with Jody and the daughter he had loved dearly for so many years, Isla, was actually Poppy's daughter. As for Kira, Poppy was convinced that the girl deserved to be ignored. Mrs. Olsen, however, stubbornly shook her head. Taylor, Isla was wrong. She lied and caused us to misunderstand Kira. We should apologize to Kira. Taylor frowned. Apologize? How can our daughter apologize to Poppy's daughter? Poppy immediately said, There's no need. The Olsen family raised her. How much a favor is that? Besides, she was already in the wrong for shamelessly chasing after Mr. Horton. It's only right and proper for the Olsen family to discipline her. It's a blessing for her. Mrs. Olsen looked at them and sighed softly, but didn't argue further. After dinner, as Isla escorted her back to her room, Mrs. Olsen looked at her. If you have time tomorrow, I'll take you to see Kira and apologize to her. Isla's face stiffened. She had avoided her father's punishment, but not Mrs. Olsen's. She weakly said, Okay. Seeing her like this, Mrs. Olsen sighed again. Didn't you want to introduce Jake to Drive South? Let's do it together tomorrow. Isla's eyes immediately lit up. She held onto Mrs. Olsen's arm. All right, Mom, you're the best. Because she offended old Mrs. Horton, she lost 2% of the shares in Horton Group. She now urgently needs to show her worth to the Horton family, fearing that Jake might call off their engagement. Mrs. Olsen patted her head in resignation. After Isla left happily, Mrs. Olsen then looked at Aunt South. Sister South, I've been unwell all these years and didn't have the energy to discipline Isla. I haven't done my job, she started coughing. But Aunt South said, Ma'am, you're overthinking it. I think Miss Isla is very nice. She's considerate and a good daughter. Even if she occasionally lies, as long as she changes in the future, it doesn't matter. But Mrs. Olsen said, Kira never lies. She started coughing violently again. Aunt South immediately helped her to the bed. You're always thinking too much. That's why after all these years, you haven't recovered from this disease. Mrs. Olsen smiled bitterly. The next day, ever since Kira woke up in the morning, she's been a bit on edge. It had been 10 years since she last met Mrs. Olsen, and she didn't know if Mrs. Olsen would be happy or angry when they met. At noon, she decided to go home, take a shower, and change her clothes. The old lady asked Louis to take her home. The two of them left the hospital room, and as soon as they got downstairs, they saw Tom walking over. Boss. Louis slightly nodded at him. Then Tom handed a piece of paper to Kira. Miss Olsen, you can take a look. Kira took it in bewilderment and found that the paper listed a row of renowned universities in the country, with famous professors in the field of new energy. She looked at Tom, confused. What's this? Tom slightly raised his chin. These are all professors more renowned than Professor Miller. You can choose one to continue your postgraduate studies. It's Mr. Horton's compensation for canceling your research position eligibility, Miss Olsen. You can consider it a blessing in disguise. Kira's lips twitched. That won't be necessary. She had heard of most of these professors, and many of them had sent her emails, wanted to learn from her professional knowledge. So you want to continue with Professor Miller's graduate program? No. If these people don't suit your taste, do you want to join Drive South's graduate program? Tom frowned. That's a bit difficult. Drive South is highly sought after now. I heard several foreign universities are offering him positions. Miss Olsen, such a genius professor will only recruit genius students. I'm afraid you might not meet his standards. You may as well not get your expectations too high. Choose one from these professors. After graduating from the master's program, you can apply for Drive South's PhD program, right? 2-2. Kira looked at him as if she was looking at a fool. She then said to Louis, Mr. Horton, you don't need to drive me back. I'll take a taxi. After saying that, she left the hospital right away, hailed a cab, and left. Tom scratched his head. I heard that Isla wanted to do a postgraduate program on her drive south. Is Kira trying to be as good as her? Is that why she wants drive south? Isn't that beyond her abilities? But Lewis was staring in the direction Kira left. His handsome and firm face was expressionless, and his brooding eyes were like bottomless pits, hiding his thoughts. He suddenly said, "Then help her contact drive south." What? Tom was stupefied. Why was his boss being so nice to her? Was he mesmerized by her good looks? Mrs. Olson arrived with Isla and Jake at the private restaurant 10 minutes early. After getting out of the car, Jake frowned at the surroundings. Why here? Isla was confused. Jake, what's wrong? Jake pursed his lips. Nothing. Isla then looked at Mrs. Olson. Mom, has Drive South arrived yet? Mrs. Olson said, Drive South is already in the private room. Enhance. The three of them entered the restaurant. Jake looked around, but didn't see the familiar figure he was expecting. He stopped thinking about Kira and looked at Isla. Would Drive South be coming to work at the Horton Group? Isla glanced at Mrs. Olson, then lowered her voice to say, Jake, you should go in and have a good chat with Drive South first. I believe that as long as you show enough sincerity, Drive South will surely be moved. She turned to Mrs. Olson and said apologetically, Mom, I think my bra came undone. Can you come with me to the restroom to fix it? Mrs. Olson accompanied her to the restroom. Jake made his way to the private room's entrance. His first job when he joined the Horton Group was in the Research and Development Department. If Drive South could join his team, it would greatly enhance his prestige within the company. He tidied up his clothes before pushing open the door. What greeted his eyes was the attractive back view of a woman who was pouring tea with her back to the door. The renowned Drive South turned out to be a young woman. Jake suppressed his astonishment and respectfully said, Drive South, nice to meet you. I'm Jake Horton from the Horton Group. The woman slowly turned around. Upon seeing the pretty face, Jake was taken aback. Kira, what are you doing here? Kira received a WhatsApp message from Mrs. Olson, saying that she would be here soon. So she poured tea into Mrs. Olson's cup. But she didn't expect Jake to barge in. A flicker of interest appeared on her face, but her voice was lackadaisical. I should be the one asking that question. She had made the appointment with Mrs. Olson. Jake put on a cold face. Don't worry. I'm not here to see you. He looked around. Where's Drive South? Kira was taken aback. Who? Jake said impatiently. The guest in this room. Where is he? Kira Olson narrowed her eyes without replying. Footsteps approached, and Mrs. Olson walked in with Isla. Upon seeing Kira, both slightly paused their steps. Isla's face turned dark instantly. Tears welled up in Mrs. Olson's eyes. You are? Kira. After Kira left the Olson family, Mrs. Olson didn't see her again. 10 years was enough time for Kira to blossom into a beautiful woman from a teenage girl. Kira was touched. After seeing her, Mrs. Olson didn't show any discomfort or sadness, but only seemed overjoyed. Perhaps her escape over the past decade was unnecessary. Suppressing the tears in her eyes, Kira stepped forward and smiled. Mrs. Olson, have you been well lately? Yes, cough, cough, I've been well. How about you, Kira? I heard from your father that you are now married. Mrs. Olson sat down at the main seat, holding onto Kira's hand tightly. Kira nodded without saying much. Mrs. Olson seemed regretful. She wanted to ask why Kira didn't bring her husband to the Olsons, but considering Taylor's attitude yesterday and the way Poppy ignored and reproached Kira, she didn't bring it up. Seeing this, Isla asked with flickering eyes, Kira, what are you doing here? Jake scoffed. She has been working part-time here all along. Isla looked surprised. Working part-time? Are you working as a waitress here? Mrs. Olson gripped Kira's hand tightly and asked with concern, I heard you started working in the Horton Group. Why are you still working part-time? Is it because you are short of money? Kira said quietly, No, Mom, let's catch up some other time. We have an important guest today. Isla interrupted them, then looked at Kira again. Kira, we were originally planning to invite you to join us for dinner, but as you are working now, it's not a good time for you, is it? What if other customers need your service? We would interfere with your work. Later, we'll give you a little extra tip as compensation for your efforts. Please keep quiet. Mrs. Olson scolded Isla, then quickly looked at Kira. They were both Taylor's daughters, but one was high above while the other was just a waitress. Kira must be feeling very upset, right? Unexpectedly, Kira's expression remained calm, as if she didn't recognize the disparity in their status. Mrs. Olson was pleased. She said, "Kira, we made an appointment with Drive South today. You're also in the new energy field, right? Join us. I'll be beneficial for your future." Isla clenched her fists. Drive South was her trump card. Why would Mrs. Olson introduce Drive South to Kira? What if Drive South was also seduced by Kira's charm? Thinking about it, Isla scanned the room with her eyes and finally stopped at the teacup on the table. It was steaming hot. She picked up the cup, walked to Kira's side, and said, "Kira, Mom asked me to apologize to you yesterday. I'll toast to you with this tea." After saying that, she let go of her fingers, and the scalding tea was about to pour on Kira. Kira had noticed something was wrong. Ever since they were little, Isla had always despised her and looked down on her. How could Isla possibly apologize to her voluntarily? Seeing Isla's hand tilt, Kira snickered internally. She simply spun around as if she didn't notice anything and brushed against the cup that was supposed to spill tea on her. The cup rebounded, and the tea splashed on Isla instead. The hot tea stained Isla's blouse and scalded her skin. Isla let out a cry. She froze for a moment before bracing herself against the pain and said with a grievance, "Kira, I know you hate me, but how could you do this?" Kira lowered her eyes and pretended to be innocent. "I'm sorry. I didn't see you." Isla's eyes were filled with tears as if she was about to cry. Upon seeing this, Jake said angrily, "Kira, is this how you behave as a waitress? You're so clumsy that you hurt your customer. Call your manager over immediately. I want to file a complaint against you." Mrs. Olson immediately tried to calm him down. "Enough. We're all family here." Isla's eyes flickered as she interjected, "That's right. Perhaps Kira was just too excited about the prospect of meeting Drive South. Once she met Drive South, she could rise to a different level and out of my reach." Jake had this thought in his mind, so he immediately said, "Auntie Isla is my fiancée. I have to protect her. She can't be mistreated like this." He looked at Kira. "Considering how you're behaving, what makes you think you're even fit to meet Drive South? Will you leave on your own, or should I escort you out?" Mrs. Olson frowned and was about to say something when Isla quickly held onto her arm. "Mom, Jake is angry. Let Kira leave first to prevent further conflicts." Mrs. Olson had no choice but to nod. She looked at Kira apologetically. "Kira, come home more often when you have time. If we get the chance next time, I'll introduce you to Drive South." Just as Kira was about to speak, Isla quickly changed the topic. "Mom, why hasn't Drive South arrived yet?" Mrs. Olson sighed. "I'll send another message." "There's no need to do that." Kira smiled faintly. "Drive South is already here." At her words, everyone in the room turned to look at her. Isla hesitated. "Where is Drive South?" Jake also looked at Kira eagerly. Agitated, Mrs. Olson began to cough violently. "Where is?" Seeing this, Kira hastily handed her a cup of tea. Mrs. Olson took the cup of tea with her shaky hands. The next moment, the teacup slipped from her hand. Mrs. Olson fainted on the dining table. "Ma'am!" Kira cried out, instinctively reaching out to help Mr. Olson, but was pushed away by Isla. "Back off! What did you do to my mom?" "Mom, wake up! Quick, call an ambulance." The ambulance arrived promptly. Kira wanted to get in the ambulance and follow them to the hospital, but was stopped by Jake. An illegitimate daughter should stay away from Mrs. Olson. "If anything happens to her because of you, I won't let it pass." He pushed her away. Kira didn't argue. She hailed a taxi and followed closely behind them. Lewis finished dinner with the old lady and was working outside the suite. Having read the documents for a long time, he felt irritated and decided to gaze into the distance out of the window. Suddenly, he saw a familiar figure downstairs. A group of people were hastily pushing a stretcher toward the inpatient department. Kira was following them from afar, looking like an abandoned little fox. Lewis raised his eyebrows and suddenly stood up, heading outside. Once he reached the ground floor, he saw Isla and Jake arranging the hospitalization procedures. The doctor said, "Sorry, all the wards are currently full. You can stay in the corridor until a bed is available, and we'll arrange it as soon as possible." Jake asked, "Are there no VIP wards available? Price is not an issue." The doctor answered no. Isla cried pitifully, "Jake, what do we do now?" "Don't panic. I'll figure something out." Jake pulled out his mobile phone and started making calls aside. Lewis noticed that while Isla looked anxious, she didn't seem to be too worried about Mrs. Olson. His gaze fell on Akira. Unlike Isla Olson, the girl looked calm but was staring at Mrs. Olson on the stretcher. It seemed as if she was extremely cautious, not wanting to disturb the patient at all. Although she didn't say a word, it was clear from her expression that she was worried. Lewis studied her. Suddenly, he said to Tom, who was following him, "Help Miss Olson get a bed." Yes. Kira was waiting by Mrs. Olson's stretcher. Seeing that Jake had made some calls with a darkened face, she knew he couldn't solve the problem. Mrs. Olson wasn't in a life-threatening situation. She had just fainted due to insomnia caused by persistent coughing. She simply needed a good rest. It was too noisy here, but Kira didn't have connections in Ocean Ion hospitals. She wondered if she should ask that person for help. She hesitated and took out her phone, found a number named Creditor, and was about to make a call. The registration counter at the inpatient department received a call and immediately gestured toward them. "A VIP ward has just become vacant," Isla said happily. "Jake, you are amazing." Jake looked confused. He thought his friends were just placating him when they promised to figure something out. Did they actually manage to help? He didn't give it a second thought and took credit for the accomplishment. The group went upstairs to the ward. Kira followed suit. Mrs. Olson looked more gaunt than she did 10 years ago, her face devoid of any color. She was pushed into the ward. Kira followed her, but was stopped by Isla at the door. "Kira, my mother needs rest. Please don't disturb her." Bang! The door shut. Kira stood in place, stunned. Although she was worried about Mrs. Olson's health, she understood that she didn't have the right or status to push this door open. Kira was planning to wait until Mrs. Olson woke up, so she sat down on the bench outside. Not long after, she heard hasty footsteps. Taylor, with a worried look on his face, hurried into the ward as he panted for breath. After confirming that Mrs. Olson wasn't in critical condition, he took Isla outside to talk in the corridor. Taylor frowned and asked, "What happened? How did she faint all of a sudden?" Isla looked over at Kira, who was sitting on the side, and said, "Kira insisted on getting to know Drive South. She argued with Jake, which upset Mom." As soon as she said that, Taylor looked fiercely at Kira. Ungrateful creature. Without saying another word, he swung his arm to slap Kira. Kira didn't dodge. All she could think of was the image of Mrs. Olson's pale face after she fainted. She recalled what Isla once said, "My mom is unhappy because of you." Maybe she really shouldn't have appeared in front of Mrs. Olson. Smack! The anticipated pain never came. When she opened her eyes, she saw a tall figure standing in front of her. Lewis, suited and booted, looked like a deity. He stood there as if he was holding up the sky for her. Kira blinked, suppressing the tears in her eyes and the bitterness in her heart. She heard Taylor's flustered voice. "Mr. Horton, what are you?" Then she heard Lewis's deep, pleasant voice. "Mr. Olson, I wouldn't have intervened, but my grandma likes her, and if she sees any injury on Miss Olson, she'll be upset." Taylor immediately said, "I'm sorry about that." They were about to say something when Mrs. Olson coughed. She was awake. Taylor and Isla immediately went inside. Kira stood up, wanting to go in and check on Mrs. Olson's condition, but didn't dare to. She hesitated at the door for a long time. She could hear Mrs. Olson's weak voice. "I'm fine. Don't worry. I haven't slept properly for a long time, so I fell asleep as soon as I fainted. It was quite comfortable." Kira relaxed, resurrecting her lost vitality. Lewis averted his gaze. The girl had just looked as lost as a homeless little fox, and he felt sorry for her. He asked, "Are you not going in?" Kira answered, "Not for now. Otherwise, it would lead to a verbal showdown, which would disturb Mrs. Olson." Just as the two turned around, they saw the old lady, who was supported by the butler. I heard my granddaughter-in-law's mother is hospitalized, so I came to check. Kira held her arm. Grandma, Mrs. Olson isn't my mother. Did I get it wrong? The old lady suddenly took out her phone, found a photo, and gave it to Kira. Granddaughter-in-law, this is a photo that you sent to me before, saying it was you and your mother. Isn't the person in the war the one in this photo? Kira glanced at the photo and was immediately taken aback. In the photo was Mrs. Olson and her. Kira looked at the photograph with bewilderment. In the photo, she and Mrs. Olson were at the seaside. Both wore white chiffon dresses. She was in the front with Mrs. Olson in the back, and both were beaming. They indeed looked like a mother and daughter with a close relationship. But Kira didn't have a white chiffon dress. She left the Olson family when she was in junior high and hadn't seen Mrs. Olson since. How could there be a picture of them together? She took old Mrs. Horton's phone and zoomed in on the photo. And she found some clues. The photo was photoshopped. The method was quite unprofessional, and it seemed like they found a picture of a mother and daughter online and then replaced their faces with hers and Mrs. Olson's. She looked at old Mrs. Horton. When did I send this to you? Old Mrs. Horton shook her head. I don't remember. How did I send it to you? Email? Or text message? Old Mrs. Horton kept shaking her head. I can't remember. Kira didn't know what to say. Old Mrs. Horton occasionally said one or two surprising things, but then was unable to explain them, which frustrated Kira. But old Mrs. Horton was very firm. Granddaughter-in-law, she's your mother. You can't ignore your mother. If Kira could, she really wished Mrs. Olson was her mother. Kira lowered her eyes to hide the bitterness in them. I know. She took old Mrs. Horton back to the ward. Lewis did not enter the room and only stood in the corridor. Tom quickly came over. Boss, we figured it out. Miss Olson went to work at that private restaurant again and ran into the Olson family. She went home to shower and change clothes while Lewis and Tom thought she was going on a date with her boyfriend. Lewis smiled faintly and asked indifferently, is Horton Group not paying her much? Otherwise, why would she go work elsewhere? Tom answered, that's not the case. Old Mrs. Horton made the arrangement. Maybe the work arranged by Jalen for her is too difficult, and she's afraid she'll be fired? Kira's situation in the company was all under Tom's supervision. However, Lewis didn't think it was that simple. What were the Olson family doing at the private restaurant? Tom replied, they had arranged to meet Drive South. Mr. Jake also went because of this. Where's Drive South? He didn't show up in the end. A faint light flickered in Lewis's deep eyes, and an idea began to form. But he thought this idea was too absurd. After a 2-hour rest, Mrs. Olson felt much better. She started coughing as she spoke. Isla, let Jake go home first. Hearing this, Isla's expression turned slightly awkward. Jake stayed here not because he was worried about Mrs. Olson, but because he was here for Drive South. She hesitated and said, Mom, Drive South. Mrs. Olson realized what she meant and immediately said, hand me the phone. I stood Drive South up today. I need to give an explanation. After she texted Drive South and rearranged their meeting, Isla sent Jake out the door. Isla said, Jake, don't worry. There won't be any problems with Drive South. Jake said, Isla, right now Horton Group's R&D department has a few hard nuts to crack, and they don't respect me at all. Jalen is one of them. As long as we can invite Drive South to join us, I'll make a great contribution to the R&D department and can gain a firm foothold. So Drive South is very important to me. You must convince him. Okay. The two were talking as they entered the elevator. After they left, Kira came out of the corner. She didn't want to confront Isla in front of Mrs. Olson for fear that Mrs. Olson would get overly emotional and worsen her condition. She arrived at the ward, pushed open the door, and entered. Taylor's face darkened immediately when he saw her. What are you doing here? Get out. Kira's eyes turned cold, and then Mrs. Olson's clear yet gentle voice rang out. Is it Kira? Let her come in. Taylor glared at Kira and warned her. Don't upset Mrs. Olson anymore. As I said, it wasn't Kira's fault. I was just exhausted from not sleeping well for a few days. Mrs. Olson nagged a bit, then held Kira's hand. Poor child. You must have been frightened today, right? Although Mrs. Olson was thin and didn't seem approachable, her hands were very warm. Kira smiled. No, that's good. You should come home more often in the future. Mrs. Olson lay on the bed and spoke in a kind voice. And your husband, your mother said he's a little punk, but I don't believe that. Kira, you have good taste and good judgment. I'm sure the man you have chosen has his merits. Introduce him to me someday. Kira felt like crying. Of course. From the day she got her marriage certificate, all she received was abuse and humiliation from others. Only from Mrs. Olson could she hear such caring and concerned words. Mrs. Olson wanted to say something else, but she started coughing violently again. Taylor said, "Okay, don't talk anymore. You need to rest." Kira stood up. She took a bottle of white pills from her pocket and put it in Mrs. Olson's hand. This is a cough suppressant that I asked someone to buy. If you can't sleep at night, you could take one. Okay. Kira didn't want to disturb Mrs. Olson's rest, so she said goodbye and left. After she left, Mrs. Olson looked at the bottle of medicine and sighed. Kira still cares about me. However, Taylor disdainfully said, will someone who cares about you not come home to see you for 10 years? How could you be tricked by a bottle of medicine from who knows which small clinic? He threw the bottle into the trash can. I heard that Nora is developing a cough suppressant that's effective in clinical trials. I'll find connections to get it for you. Mrs. Olson's eyes dimmed. You actually believe such rumors? Chronic neurogenic cough is a rare disease. Who would bother developing a drug for it? They'll never make up for the cost. Taylor held her hand. We have a try. You're coughing all night and can't sleep. It's too uncomfortable. It hurts me to see you like this. Mrs. Olson could only nod. It was well into the night. Mrs. Olson suddenly started coughing violently again. Although she was extremely tired, she just couldn't fall asleep. She lay on her side, suppressing the itch in her throat, not wanting to wake up Taylor in the next room. No one knew how desperate she was. Chronic neurogenic cough couldn't be completely cured. The disease was getting worse and worse, and the anxiety from lack of sleep even made her have suicidal thoughts on many occasions. If she wasn't so strong-willed, she might have killed herself a long time ago. But she didn't know how much longer she could hold on. Lately, she had been feeling weaker every single day. Perhaps she wouldn't live to see her daughter get married. Mrs. Olson was thinking pessimistically when her eyes suddenly fell on the bottle of medicine in the trash can. Somehow, she picked up the bottle, opened it, took out a white pill, and put it in her mouth. Enhance. After the white tablet entered her mouth, it immediately emitted a refreshing, cool sensation. Her itching throat seemed to be wrapped in fresh water, and it felt much better. Mrs. Olson swallowed the tablet without drinking water. Cough! She started coughing again. She smiled bitterly. Just now, for a fleeting moment, she almost thought the tablet was working. What a wishful thinking. Mrs. Olson lay in bed and closed her eyes. She has been dealing with chronic neurotic coughing for over 2 decades. She had taken numerous medicines and consulted so many experts over the years, but it hadn't gotten any better. Shirley? Shirley, wake up. Mrs. Olson slowly opened her eyes and saw Taylor standing next to her bed, the entire room bright as day. With the hospital's incandescent lights so bright, feeling a bit confused, she asked, "What time is it?" 10 in the morning. Taylor looked at her anxiously. "You should eat something, or else your blood sugar will drop." Mrs. Olson was stunned. She turned her head in confusion. Only then did she notice that the light in the room wasn't coming from the lamps, but from the sunlight. She actually slept through the whole night. How could that be possible? It must be that bottle of medicine, the one Kira gave her. Aunt South, who was next to her, was so excited that she had tears in her eyes. "Madam, the sleeping pills the doctor gave you yesterday really worked. You actually slept for a full 10 hours. Mrs. Olson was astounded. "What sleeping pills?" Aunt South looked toward Isla. "Mr. Jake got them for you. He heard that you were having trouble sleeping, so he specifically found a strong sleeping pill and added it to the medicine you were taking. We didn't tell you because we were afraid that if you kept thinking about it, you would have even more trouble sleeping. We didn't expect it to work this well." Mrs. Olson hesitated. Was that so? But sleeping pills only aid sleep. When she woke up today, She clearly felt that her throat was much clearer. Her gaze fell on the pillow next to her, where the plastic bottle without a label was. She would try it again tonight. If she only took sleeping pills and not this medicine, she would then know which one actually worked. Thinking this, Mrs. Olson fell silent. Meanwhile, Taylor looked toward Isla and spoke with relief. My son-in-law is amazing. I heard that there was a major flu outbreak recently, and the inpatient department is full. They couldn't find a vacant ward yesterday, and it was Jake who pulled a lot of strings to arrange this one. We are really grateful to him. Only then did Mrs. Olson find out that the ward was also arranged by Jake. He's such a good kid. Seizing upon the moment, Isla said, Mom, since Jake is so kind, you should help him too. Mrs. Olson asked, How can I help? Taylor thought of something and said, Is there some difficulty Jake faces at work? Isla nodded, sighing. His family wants Jake to manage the R&D department, but the researchers there are all senior and not very obedient to Jake. If we could invite Drive South there, even just as an external technical support, then Jake could stabilize his position. Having said that, Isla looked toward Mrs. Olson. As she expected, she saw a struggle and hesitation on Mrs. Olson's face. Mrs. Olson has her own principles in dealing with people and matters. She didn't like to exploit kindness to seek benefits, but she was even more afraid of owing favors. Mrs. Olson hesitated a moment, then finally said, I'll ask Drive South, but if he doesn't agree, then let it be. A smile spread across Isla's face. Great. Based on her experience, whenever Mrs. Olson asked for something, Drive South never refused. Mrs. Olson took out her phone, found Drive South on WhatsApp, carefully chose her words, and sent a message. South, do you have a minute? I have a favor to ask. When Kira received this message, she had just brought old Mrs. Horton back up from a walk. She read the message with a frown. Why did Mrs. Olson suddenly contact her? Was there an issue? Was there something wrong with yesterday's drug? Or did it have an allergic reaction? That drug was actually still in the clinical trial stage, and she had originally planned to wait for the trial to end before giving it to Mrs. Olson. However, seeing Mrs. Olson's severe condition, she took it out in advance. Anxious, Kira asked the nursing staff to bring old Mrs. Horton back to her ward and headed for Mrs. Olson's ward in a hurry. Louis, who was working in the outer office area, saw his grandmother walk in. He instinctively looked behind her, but didn't see that slender figure. His eyes flickered. Where's Miss Olson? Old Mrs. Horton replied. She's gone to see her mother. Louis raised an eyebrow. Did something happen to Mrs. Olson? Old Mrs. Horton immediately became anxious. My granddaughter-in-law, indeed, rushed over just now. Oh, you brat. Hurry up and check up on her. Louis pursed his lips. After a moment of contemplation, he rose to his feet. Tom followed him in a hurry. Kira ran into Mrs. Olson's ward, only to find the ward was filled with many people. Not only was Jake there, but even Poppy was present. Somebody must have said something because everyone was laughing. However, the merriment quickly died when she stepped into the room. Kira stood at the doorway, feeling rather unnecessary. Mrs. Olson seemed all right. She lowered her head and was ready to leave. Mrs. Olson wanted to stop her, but seeing all the people in the room, she knew it was best for Kira to leave for now. They could meet alone when there was time. Poppy, however, opened her mouth. Hey, isn't that Miss Olson? Are we not good enough for you now that you've cozied up to old Mrs. Horton? Kira didn't respond and turned to leave, but Poppy grabbed her. I heard you try your best to please old Mrs. Horton, staying by her bedside all night and doing all sorts of unpleasant chores. Do you think she'll consider you as close as their own kin? What kind of daydream are you having? You're nothing but a plaything to them. Isla hastily said, Don't say that. Old Mrs. Horton really likes Kira. Poppy interrupted her loudly. Likes her? Look at what Mr. Jake does for you. That's what people do for someone they like. Poppy turned toward Jake Horton, flattering him. I heard that yesterday they couldn't free up any ward at all. There are many families with decent background who want to get into the hospital, but all of them have to wait in line. It was Mr. Jake who helped us out. That's how Mrs. Olson got into the VIP ward. Jake Horton glanced at Kira and smiled humbly. My uncle's doesn't know about this matter. He would have helped if he knew. I just did what little I could. Your little contribution has been of great help to our home. Poppy turned to Kira Olsen and mocked her again. Even if Mr. Olsen knew, he wouldn't care about you. No matter how hard you try to please him, he's just toying with you like any Tom, Dick, or Harry. Kira clenched her fists, but didn't want to argue here to avoid disturbing Mrs. Olsen's rest. Louis, who had just arrived, stood outside the ward and heard everything. His face was stone cold, and he cast a glance at Tom. Tom took the hint immediately. He cleared his throat and entered the room. Mrs. Olsen, I'm here to convey Mr. Horton's regards. How are you finding the ward? Is it comfortable? The room instantly fell silent. Everyone simultaneously turned to look at Tom, then at Jake. Jake looked dumbfounded. Was this ward arranged by his uncle? Poppy was also stunned, but quickly regained her composure and laughed. Mr. Jake, I didn't know you asked Mr. Horton to give us this room. Jake's expression froze. However, Tom smiled. Miss Olsen asked Mr. Horton for this room. Mr. Jake, did you also go to Mr. Horton? Jake felt like crawling into a hole in embarrassment. He stuttered, I made a lot of calls at that time and asked several people for help. They said they would help. It was a misunderstanding. Isla felt humiliated. She clenched her fists tightly, and for the first time, she didn't find Jake all that aloof. The strange atmosphere was finally broken by Mrs. Olsen, who coughed a few times and said to Tom, Please thank Mr. Horton for me. We're very comfortable here. Once I get better, I'll visit old Mrs. Horton. Tom said, As long as you're comfortable here, Miss Olsen won't be worried, and old Mrs. Horton will be happy. All the businessmen could infer the implied favoritism toward Kira. This realization made everyone in the room feel slightly uneasy. They didn't expect old Mrs. Horton to favor Kira so much. Only Mrs. Olsen was genuinely happy. With Kira living alone outside, she had always been anxious. But since their relationship was rather delicate, she couldn't appear to be too close to Kira. Now that old Mrs. Horton sincerely cared for Kira, Mrs. Olsen could finally relax. Kira was slightly surprised. She hadn't expected it was Louis who had helped. She looked at Poppy, a hint of mockery playing on her lips. Infuriated by her expression, Poppy fumed. Little brat, what are you proud of? Just because you have a patron doesn't make you any better. Shut up, Taylor said angrily. My wife needs to rest. What are you blabbering about? Get your ass back home. Poppy stopped talking and seemed a little hurt. Taylor, leave. Poppy's face flushed red. She glared resentfully at Kira before hurriedly exiting the room. After she left, Kira turned to Mrs. Olsen. Ma'am, how did you sleep last night? Upon hearing this, Mrs. Olsen unconsciously gripped the small medicine bottle hidden under the blanket and said slowly, I slept very well. It has been a long time since I've slept this comfortably. I'm glad to hear that. Kira didn't explain much, but only nodded. I'll let you rest. All right. As Kira and Tom left the room, they saw Louis standing in the hallway. He was in a suit and tie, which accentuated his long legs, making him look both gentlemanly and unapproachable. He leaned against the wall and was looking down at his phone. His black hair partially covered his sharp eyebrows and eyes. His side profile, illuminated by the light, appeared defined and cold. Upon hearing them, he turned to look. His narrow eyes brimmed with icy depth. He said, Grandmother insisted that I come to check up on you. Despite his indifferent tone, his deep voice warmed Kira Olsen's heart. She smiled sincerely. Thank you. Her amorous eyes were clear and dazzling, filled with innocence and an unintentional charm. The smile on her lips was even more breathtaking, momentarily dazzling Louis. At this time, Jake's voice came from inside. Auntie, since you're okay, I'll let you rest. Sure. Isla, see Jake out. The door opened, and Jake and Isla came out. They instantly noticed Louis and Kira. Isla felt as if an enemy was approaching. Her gaze darted between the two as if trying to figure out their relationship. Jake's face darkened too. He subconsciously asked, Uncle, what are you doing here, H? Louis said meaningfully, I don't think I need to report my whereabouts to you. Such an indifferent reply seemed to bring an invisible pressure. Jake's palms immediately started to sweat. That's not what I meant. He took a deep breath and looked at Kira. The girl's face had a kind of unabashed beauty. Mr. Horton was also a good-looking man. When the two stood together, they were like a match made in heaven. A strong sense of jealousy overwhelmed Jake, and he couldn't help but speak again. "Miss Olson, you've been looking after my great-grandmother in the hospital all this time. Doesn't your husband mind?" Kira was taken aback. She subconsciously glanced at Mr. Horton and said with a smirk, "He probably doesn't mind." Jake's expression changed drastically. Before he could say anything, Lewis suddenly spoke. "Are you coming back to the ward? Grandma is waiting for you." "Coming back." Kira hesitated slightly. It had been a long time since she had heard that expression, because she had no home to come back to. Looking down, she smiled faintly. "Let's go." The two left together. Jake's gaze was dark as he stared at Kira from behind. For a moment, he felt an urge to take her back at all costs. But Isla held his arm and said, "Jake, I'll definitely help you get Drive South assistance." Jake seemed to regain his senses. "All right, I'll walk you downstairs." "Okay." After he left, Isla felt a deep sense of crisis. When she returned to the ward, she saw Mrs. Olson getting up and moving around. Her eyes flickered. She walked to the bed and pretended to tidy up the bedspread before exclaiming, "Mom, why is there a bottle of medicine on your bed?" Taylor frowned. "Isn't this the non-warning medicine that Kira gave you? Surely. Why did you pick it up again?" Mrs. Olson explained, "I took one last night, and it seemed to work." "How is that possible?" "It was clearly the sleeping pill that worked." Taylor snatched the bottle and said dismissively, "Who knows where she got the medicine from? How can you just take it? Aren't you afraid it'll harm your health?" Mrs. Olson hurriedly said, "Don't throw it away. I won't take it tonight. I want to see which medicine works." Taylor said reluctantly, "All right." Soon it was night. Aunt South held the sleeping pill in her hand, looking as if she was holding a magic panacea. After seeing Mrs. Olson take it, she turned off the light and quietly left the room. The room quieted down. Half an hour later, there was still no sound inside. Aunt South said excitedly, "Mr. Jake's medicine is a lifesaver for Mrs. Olson. She hasn't had a full night's sleep in over 20 years. Isla pretended to be shy. "Don't say that. The ward wasn't arranged by Jake, and it was such a big embarrassment today." Upon hearing this, Taylor said, "Compared to the ward, this medicine is the most important. Even if Shirley were in the presidential suite, she wouldn't be able to sleep without it." Kira went out of her way to seek Mr. Davis's help to show off and brag. "What? Are we supposed to be grateful and indebted to her?" After that, he glanced in disgust at the bottle of medicine Kira had sent. "Aunt South, get rid of this stupid medicine. Don't let Shirley take it again." As soon as he said those words, a suppressed, severe coughing sound came from the ward. Taylor was slightly startled. He exchanged a glance with Aunt South and immediately rushed into the ward. One of the characteristics of a nervous cough was that it tended to get worse at night. Aunt South switched on the light. Everyone could see Mrs. Olson sitting halfway up in bed, her hand covering her mouth, her face red from the effort of coughing. She clutched her chest. Her frail body trembled violently with each cough. The sight was alarming. Taylor steadied her by the shoulder. "Shirley, are you all right?" But Mrs. Olson said, "Medicine." Then she coughed again. Taylor was puzzled. Aunt South, however, understood and immediately rushed out to bring in the medicine bottle given by Kira. "Mrs. Olson, the medicine is here." Mrs. Olson nodded, and as Aunt South anxiously opened the bottle and was about to hand her a tablet, her hand was stopped by Isla. Isla frowned and said, "Mom's cough suddenly worsened. Could it have been caused by this medicine? I think it's better not to take medicine with an unknown origin." Her intuition told her that the medicine might actually work. That's why she couldn't let Mrs. Olson take it. She looked at Taylor. When someone is prejudiced against another, everything the latter did seemed wrong. Kira was the daughter of Poppy, and that was Taylor's biggest prejudice against her. As expected, Taylor said angrily, "Kira is always causing more harm than good. I've always said she's unreliable. Despite your kindness to her, surely she tries to harm you with this medicine." Isla's heart leaped in satisfaction. Mrs. Olson, however, seized a momentary relief from her cough and looked to Aunt South. "Give me the medicine." Aunt South, ever so loyal, immediately handed the tablet to Mrs. Olson, who promptly put it in her mouth. Surely, as Taylor yelled in alarm and tried to stop her, he realized Mrs. Olson had stopped coughing. She took a deep breath after her fit of coughing subsided and then looked at them seriously. "It's confirmed. It's Kira's medicine that worked." When Mrs. Olson's coughing finally stopped and she fell asleep, the others all came out to the outer room again. Isla's face was pale. She bit her lip and said, "Dad, is Kira really so capable that she actually managed to buy an effective medicine? What capability does she have? It must have been Mr. Horton who helped her buy it." Taylor frowned. It seems old Mrs. Horton really does favor her. Isla immediately clenched her fists. "In the VIP ward. What do we eat for lunch today?" The old lady racked her brain. "Oatmeal? No, it was pasta. Brad, am I right?" Lewis nodded with a smile. "Correct." The old lady was pleased. "I know I don't have any problems. My brain works fine." Lewis didn't say anything. Upon close inspection, one could tell that his eyes didn't mirror his smile. In fact, they had rice for lunch. His grandmother had forgotten again. Her condition seemed to be worsening, and her memory began to degenerate. At this moment, Kira suddenly said, "Grandma, what color was Mr. Horton's tie yesterday?" The old lady immediately said, "Purple. This Brad is very particular. He even wore diamond cufflinks. And the day before yesterday?" "Blue. I bought him that blue tie." Kira smiled lightly and looked meaningful at Lewis. Grandma remembers the things she cares about very clearly. Lewis looked at her. She was sitting in a recliner, sinking deeply into it. She was lazily playing with her phone, with her head lowered, her long, black hair casually draped over her back, accentuating her fair skin and giving her an overall soft glow. What she just said was intended to comfort him. His anxiety gradually subsided. The old lady suddenly chuckled. "Granddaughter-in-law, I was right, wasn't I?" Kira said, "Yes." The old lady then looked at Lewis. "Brat, did you see that? Your wife even remembers clearly what you wear every day. She's thinking about you all the time." Kira was shocked. She merely has a photographic memory. She really didn't intentionally remember these things. She wanted to explain something, but noticed that Lewis was staring at the computer in front of him, completely ignoring them. He must have not taken the old woman's words to heart, right? In that case, she wouldn't explain to avoid seeming overly defensive. Kira didn't notice the slight redness on his earlobes and once again focused on her work, the finishing touches of Alzheimer's research, a problem that had her utterly stumped. She rose to her feet. "I'm going for a walk." Just as she was about to take the Shiba Inu kitten for a stroll, someone lightly tapped her shoulder. She turned around to see a middle-aged man with a rowdy appearance standing behind her, grinning. "Niece, long time no see." Kira's face darkened. This man was Poppy's brother, her uncle, Finley Hill. He was jobless and thoroughly addicted to gambling. He spoke with a foul breath, and his yellow, rotten teeth made her nauseous. Kira took a step back. "What are you here for?" Finley rubbed his hands and said sleazily, "Oh my, I hear that my dear niece has gotten into the good graces of the Horton family. I'm a bit tight on cash lately. Could you lend me some money?" Kira sneered. Poppy was extremely devoted to her brother. She squatted in the Olsons' house without leaving and gave all the living expenses provided by the Olsons to this brother of hers. After Kira left the Olson family, Finley had shamelessly gone to see her several times for money. Later, presumably seeing that she really had no money, he finally backed off. Who would have thought he'd show up again now? Kira said, "I have no money." Finley didn't believe her. "You serve that old woman so well, and she hasn't given you any money?" Kira narrowed her eyes. "Not yet. Maybe she will in the future." Finley immediately laughed. "Then you must lend me some money when you get it. If you give me enough, I can tell you a secret." "Fine." Finley didn't dare to make a fuss here. After all, the VIP ward was inhabited by either the rich or the powerful. With security patrolling nearby, he chuckled and left. Kira gave a snort of derision. Just then, her phone rang. She took it out to see that it was Mrs. Olson. She quickly answered the call. Isla was anxiously pacing the room. She was relying on Drive South to secure her position in the Horton family. But Drive South hadn't replied to Mrs. Olson's messages all day today. Jake had sent a few more WhatsApp messages, persistently asking about Dr. South. Isla couldn't keep stalling. Isla suddenly stopped in her tracks and quietly entered the ward. Mrs. Olson was fast asleep, so Isla took the phone from her mother. She then went outside to the corridor. She took a deep breath, unlocked the phone, found South in the contacts, and dialed the number. The call was answered after 3 rings. The person on the other end answered with a clear voice. "Hello, Mrs. Olson. What can I do for you?" Upon hearing this voice, Isla froze. That voice was Kira. Isla's eyes widened in disbelief as she stared at her mother's phone. She wouldn't mistake that voice. The voice on the other end of the phone paused slightly, then it turned colder still. "Isla, what are you doing with Mrs. Olson's phone?" It was her. Isla felt as if she had seen a ghost. No, it couldn't be. She glanced at her phone sharply, suddenly thinking of something. She asked, "Is this your phone number?" Kira said, "What kind of question is that?" That's when it dawned on Isla. She almost forgot that Kira's nickname was also South, which was what Mrs. Olson would sometimes call her. A tremendous sigh of relief escaped her lips, followed by boundless fury. "You're such a sycophant. To get my mother's favor, you even put her family name in your nickname. Are you worthy of being called that?" Kira lowered her eyes. The name was something she had chosen when she was in elementary school. South indeed came from the surname of Mrs. Olson, a.k.a. Jody South. Kira was young at the time and chose it simply because she liked it, never thinking about whether it would bother Mrs. Olson. She was the daughter of a mistress, yet she adopted the wife's last name. Kira wondered what Mrs. Olson felt at the time. She would never know now. She said indifferently, "Did you call just to say this?" "Of course not." Isla tore off her mask of decency and said viciously, "I just want to tell you, even if you've charmed Mr. Horton through old Mrs. Horton, you're nothing more than a mistress and a toy. Mr. Horton is a married man. I'm different, though. I'll marry Jake and become a legitimate daughter-in-law of the Horton family." Kira said, "Then congratulations?" Isla felt as if she was punching cotton. She left a threat in the end. "You can't just talk about feelings in a wealthy family. I have connections with Drive South. I'll always be in an unbeatable position." Kira's mouth twitched after the phone call. Since when had she become one of Isla's pawns? As she pondered, a WhatsApp call came in again. This time, it was from Mrs. Olson. She was calling Drive South on WhatsApp. Kira operated on her phone, picked it up, and said casually, "Hello." Her voice was changed by a device. The appearance of Finley made her understand that some things were better kept low-key to avoid unwelcome relatives. Isla said respectfully, "Hello, Drive South. Sorry for the disturbance. I'm Isla Olson, the daughter of Jody South. I am calling on the Horton Group's behalf. They would like to invite you to join their R&D team. My mother also wishes for the same. May I ask if you—" "Not interested," Kira interrupted her coldly. Isla halted. She wanted to say something more, but Kira said, "I only take responsibility for companies under Mrs. Olson's name." With that, she hung up. Monday, Kira left her puppy with the old lady and dutifully went to work. As she stepped out of the hospital gate, contemplating whether to take a taxi or the subway, a Bentley slowly stopped beside her. Lewis looked straight ahead, saying indifferently, "Get in." Kira refused. "I don't think I should do that." The two weren't on such good terms yet. Lewis said, "Grandma asked me to drive you to work. You can just tell her you did that." Lewis glanced at her. "I need a photo for proof." "Fine." Kira opened the back door and sat next to Lewis. Lewis raised his phone and took a selfie of the two of them. Kira posed with her 2 fingers raised in a sweet smile. She tilted her head, and a few strands of hair fluttered across Lewis's face, leaving him rigid like he was electrocuted for a moment. In the passenger seat, Tom hesitated for a moment. He didn't recall old Mrs. Horton making this request before they left. He must have missed it. After taking the photo, Kira sat up straight and started busying herself on her phone. The two remained silent until they reached the underground parking lot of the Horton Group. Lewis took the exclusive elevator and left with Tom. Kira, on the other hand, took the staff elevator up to the R&D department. At this time, the managerial staff of the R&D department were in a tense meeting. The general manager of the R&D department announced a position change. After the decision of the company's top management, Jake, the team leader, is promoted to the vice president, who will be responsible for the technical issues of the R&D department in the future. Someone asked, "Why is this announcement so sudden?" The manager said, "Vice President Horton successfully invited Drive South to be our technical support in the R&D department. This is a big deal for the R&D department. Although Drive South doesn't work in the office, if any of you have any problems, you can ask Vice President Horton to communicate with him and solve the problem. Now, let's have Vice President Horton say a few words." Jake stood up and spoke directly. "From now on, the research and development staff of the first and second teams have to listen to my commands. Mr. Riley, I presume you won't violate the company's regulation?" Jalen, who had been working overtime all weekend at the company and had pulled 2 all-nighters, was wearing casual clothes with an air of irritation. He snorted coldly. "There's another regulation at the company that doesn't allow skipping ranks for reporting or assigning tasks. So about my staff, you can only delegate tasks through me." Jake's face darkened. "Mr. Riley, I see you don't have enough energy to manage the staff of the first team. Have you solved your core problem yet? Although the R&D department is divided into teams, it's also a whole. Your delays affect the progress of the entire project." Jalen abruptly stood up. "You also studied renewable energy, so you should know how difficult the research is. You make it sound like you can solve my core problem." Jake spoke calmly. "I cannot solve it, but I have someone who can. Do you need me to ask Drive South for help?" Jalen scoffed. "I didn't know you could be so kind." Jake's eyes were filled with a cold light. "We're all in the R&D department, so of course, I'll show extra care. But I need one of your team's technical staff to come over and assist me. How about that new intern?" "Deal." Jalen knew from the start that he was after Kira. He said coldly, "No deal. I'll do it myself slowly. Don't bother asking Drive South for me." Jake said gloomily, "Mr. Riley, don't think that hiding behind my uncle can help you do as you please here. You're responsible for delaying the entire R&D department's progress. I'll give you 2 more days. If you don't solve that problem, I'm going to request your dismissal or demotion." Jalen walked out. "Then let's see if you're capable of that." He was arrogant in the office, but once he stepped outside, Jalen lost his composure. He knew even if Lewis wanted to protect him, if Jake really put forward a request, it would be troublesome. Jalen entered the first team section of the R&D department and kicked a chair angrily. Luca was late for work. He quietly went to his workstation, afraid of causing trouble with his agitated team leader. He turned on his computer, opened his inbox, and saw an unread email. An email from Kira. Did she really solve the core problem? Seriously? Even Jalen, a PhD who returned to the country after studying abroad, couldn't solve such a core issue immediately. Kira was only an undergraduate. Even if Professor Miller praised her talent, could she solve it no matter how well she defied expectations? Luca thought those things as he clicked the mouse. He opened that email, and then he blinked. Bang! Jalen slammed the documents he held onto the table and raised his chin slightly. Meeting time. Luca didn't respond immediately. Instead, he was staring at that email. "Luca, is your butt glued to the chair?" Jalen was in a bad mood, and seeing Luca moving slowly, he shouted angrily. Luca glanced at the content of the email, saw that it was a blank file, and immediately stood up. "Coming. I'm coming." Kira failed to solve the problem, and she had probably sent this email by mistake. When he left his computer, the attachment that had just finished buffering in the email was lying quietly in the interface. In the office, Jalen frowned and briefly explained the situation at the just-concluded meeting. He didn't mention Kira and just said, "In 2 days, if this core issue cannot be solved, I'll resign." The moment these words came out, the office became quiet. Jalen did have a temper and often scolded them, but he was a qualified team leader, and they all respected him. After a while of silence, everyone started talking. "Jalen, just tell us what to do. Yes, for the next 2 days, we won't sleep." Let's do our best. Jalen delegated work, increasing each employee's workload several times, yet nobody complained. It was only after the meeting that Jalen felt like he had forgotten something. He suddenly turned to Luca. "Where's Kira? How come she wasn't at work yet?" Luca shook his head, but another person said she came in the morning, clocked in, and then went to the library. The complexion on Jalen's face instantly turned gloomy. He was struggling against Jake for her, but that woman had gone out again. Someone couldn't help saying, "Jalen, she's too ungrateful. If she worked with us on this project, she would gain so much work experience." Luca didn't agree with Kira's approach, but still spoke for her. "She just graduated from college. She doesn't understand these things. Besides, our stuff is too complicated for her. She probably won't understand. We're a team. Even if she doesn't understand, she should still stay and help at this key moment, right? Is she taking a salary and not working? Who does that? That's right. What's wrong with this girl? Is our team beginning to keep loafers?" Jalen took a deep breath, feeling that Kira was ungrateful. On the roof, Tom had been keeping an eye on the situation below and knew more about it than Group 1. He was complaining to Lewis. "Jalen is working frantically for her while she is leisurely reading in the library. All morning, she is a real femme fatale." Lewis frowned, his cool, scrutinizing eyes glancing at Tom. "Reading all morning?" "Yes, she clocked in and went there. She hasn't even had lunch yet." "What book? I didn't pay attention to that. I assume it's a paper on new energy." "You assume?" The clear displeasure in Lewis's voice gave Tom a chill, but he suddenly realized something. She's been targeting the library since she started working. So her purpose in joining Horton Group is to search for information. What book she was reading became hugely important. Tom bowed his head. "I'll find out now." But Lewis had already stood up. He was buttoning his blazer as he walked briskly out, only leaving a word behind. "Don't bother." He quickly arrived at the library and found her among the books in the neurology category. She was looking up, her eyes swiftly sweeping across a row of books, then coming to rest at the highest level of the shelf. She then saw something. She dragged over a ladder, climbed up, and reached for the book. She was wearing a loose hooded sweatshirt today, along with skinny jeans. Her movement raised the lower hem of her sweatshirt, revealing her leg. From Lewis's perspective, her legs were slender and straight, and her jeans wrapped around the pretty curves of her derriere, above which was her fair waist. Lewis paused and slowly looked away. Her fair waist seemed to be imprinted on his brain and sparked a thought in his mind. "Her waist is so thin that I can wrap my hand around it." Kira didn't notice him. After getting the book, she casually flipped through it, and her eyes suddenly lit up. The book she wanted to find was this one. Overjoyed, she momentarily forgot she was still on the ladder and stepped forward as if she wanted to go to the seat next to her. But her foot missed the step, and she lost her balance. Now she was in trouble. Just as Kira thought of this, she fell into the warm and strong arms of someone. It was only then she realized that Lewis caught her. The two were very close, and she could smell his vanilla fragrance. His large hand was holding her, and the burning heat from his palm went through her thin jeans. Kira's heart suddenly skipped a beat, and she felt so embarrassed. But she understood that he didn't mean to do that. It was just a coincidence. Kira hastily jumped down, calming herself down. "Mr. Horton, thank you." She blushed a little. Lewis paused, subconsciously looking at his empty hand. She was so light and soft. The touch just now made him suddenly feel a bit parched. He had been running the business for years, but for the first time, he felt a little at a loss. He lowered his gaze, his eyelashes slightly trembling. He controlled himself and said, "You're welcome." There was a moment of awkward silence. Kira cleared her throat. "I just remembered I had something to do in the R&D department. I need to go back." "Okay." With Lewis's permission, Kira quickly hid the book she just found in a corner out of sight, worried someone else might borrow it, then left the library. By the time she reached the elevator, her face was still burning a little. Kira casually grabbed something to eat and returned to Groupon in the research department. As soon as she entered, she noticed something was wrong right away. The colleagues who were originally quite friendly toward her now seemed like they didn't see her. Kira didn't understand and just thought everyone was not familiar with her. In the afternoon, she went to the library again, but she was stopped by Luca, who said in a low voice, "Don't go in the afternoon." "Why?" Kira was puzzled. "Didn't they say that as long as my own work is done, I can go?" Luca immediately looked around and indeed saw the odd looks from his colleagues. He too started to become impatient and said bitterly, "Yes, once the work is done, you can go, but have you finished the work I assigned you last week?" "Yes, it's done. I know it's difficult and you can't solve it overnight, so you need to stay here and—" "Wait, what?" Luca was in a stun and stared at her in disbelief. Kira casually said, "I said it was sent to your inbox last Friday." Luca swallowed. Wasn't that an empty email? Kira was bewildered. Luca realized something and ran to his workstation. Looking at his email on the computer, he indeed saw the attachment, but he still couldn't believe it. He opened the attachment nervously. The development of new energy is different from software coding. Not only did they use computer simulators, but they also had to go into the lab for real experiments. Kira had finished the task assigned to her last Friday, so Luca spent all morning in the lab assisting Jalen, and that's why he didn't notice. Once the attachment was downloaded, Luca couldn't wait to look at it. As he read through it, he immersed himself in the report. The application of core technology was a bit complex. Some of it took him quite a while to understand. Seeing his silence, Kira prepared to take the elevator to the 6th floor where the archives were located. The elevator arrived, and she entered it just as a group of members did. The R&D department and a laboratory were located on different floors of the tower, and they each had their own tasks to do. Beep! The elevator alarm beeped, indicating that it was overloaded. Someone said, "Kira, you better get off." Their tone was tinged with displeasure. Kira was taken aback and raised her head. "I wasn't the last one to get on." The person scoffed. "Even though that's the case, work is first come, first served. We're in a hurry, and you're so idle. If you're not busy, why don't you get off first?" The others immediately echoed. "Exactly. You don't actually need to work. You're just going to read books. Hurry up and go. Don't waste our time. Our team leader is still waiting for us. Would you be responsible if we were late?" Kira frowned, detecting the hostility of the group. Although she didn't quite understand what was going on, she took a deep breath and got off the elevator. She didn't need to argue about something like that. As a researcher, she understood the exasperation when a problem couldn't be resolved promptly. Besides, there were 8 elevators in total. It was just a matter of wasting a bit more time. Once the elevator doors closed, someone in the group suddenly whispered, "Were we a bit too harsh just now? She's just so tactless. She doesn't do any work at all, and yet when we achieve results, she reaps the benefits too. That's not fair." Kira entered the 6th floor through another elevator and hastily looked for a book she put away. As long as she studied hard, she was sure she could solve old Mrs. Horton's problem soon. But then, she discovered her book was gone. Kira was dumbfounded. She hurriedly looked around the bookshelf, but no matter how much she tried, she couldn't find the book. Nobody nearby seemed to be reading it. The books in the Horton Group's library clearly couldn't be taken out. Where did the book go? Suddenly, she realized something. There is only one person in the company who could get a book out of here, on the top floor. Louis was engrossed with his own eyebrows drawn together as he flipped through the thick volume in his hands. The book was about neuroscience. Briefly familiar with the subject due to his grandmother's health, he still found the book complex and difficult to understand. He was also curious to know why Kira was reading it. Tom provided Louis with a detailed report of Kira's actions downstairs. He then added, "Boss, Kira is simply taking advantage of Mrs. Horton's fondness for her and acting as she pleases. You even arranged for her to be in a department that match her major, to give her a chance to learn, and yet she shows no gratitude." Louis coldly replied, "She's not really here to work." Tom was perplexed. He couldn't help but feel that the boss seemed to be speaking up for her. It must be his illusion. He then asked, "This book doesn't seem to have much relevance. Should we return it?" Louis tapped on the book, thinking about the girl's anticipation when she saw it today. He suddenly remembered the feeling of her in his arms earlier. All of a sudden, he felt dry-mouthed No need for now. Kira had wanted to go upstairs to get the book from Louis, but when she remembered their hug earlier, she suddenly became shy. In the end, she strolled back to the R&D department. Just leaving the elevator, she spotted Jalen and some team members drinking coffee in the lounge, trying to stay awake. They all had weary expressions on their faces. Seeing Kira's laid-back demeanor, someone couldn't help but speak up. "Kira, this is a company, not a shopping mall for you to loiter around." "Exactly, we're all so busy right now. Don't you feel ashamed not offering to help? Do you even understand? Being involved in our projects can help you gain work experience. We are all on the same team. If the project is successful, the bonus is equally divided. We never look down on you for being an intern, but you can't be this unreasonable, right? You just want to earn money without doing anything. Although you're a special case here, we have never minded your lack of ability. We thought we could guide you, but your indifference to work is outrageous." Kira paused, asking seriously, "So what can I help with? You don't understand the technical stuff, so you could at least help us with odd jobs. Print some stuff, run errands, or get some coffee." Upon hearing this, Kira frowned. "I'm sorry, that's not part of my job." Having started working since junior high, she understood workplace rules. Indeed, the salary that Horton Group offered her was okay, but the 3 tasks she completed last Friday were surely worth the pay. She had no idea that the minor issue she finally resolved last week was the core problem that their entire team had been racking their brains about. Having said this, Kira was about to enter the office. The team members, however, were incensed by her remarks. What kind of person is she? She has no real skills, yet she's here putting on airs like a princess. How arrogant! We can't understand why the company would hire someone like her. Watching Kira's nonchalant demeanor and hearing these complaints, Jalen frowned even more. He wanted to help Kira, but she looked irredeemable. To think he had even stood up against Jake for her, he felt like such a fool. Jalen slammed his hand down on the table with a fury. "Kira, if you don't want to work, you're welcome to leave. We don't need freeloaders on our team." Inside the office, Luca was now filled with excitement and fanatic fervor. He was still engrossed with the email. He finally understood it. Luca shot up for his seat, ran to the door, and excitedly grabbed Jalen's arm. "It's solved. It's really solved," Luca shouted excitedly. "She actually solved it." Jalen was slightly taken aback and frowned. "Have you lost your mind?" The rest of the team members also impatiently turned their attention to him. "Luca, what are you doing? What's the matter with you this afternoon? We've been busy in the lab, but you disappeared. What did you solve? Did you solve our core problem?" As soon as these words came out, Luca immediately nodded. "Yes, the problem is solved." He dragged Lachlan toward his workstation and pointed at the computer. "Jalen, look, we weren't able to solve it because we were biased. It can be done like this." He roughly explained the solution flow he had just understood. After he finished, the entire team was shocked. "So, it can be done like this. Luca, you are impressive. Jalen won't need to resign." While everyone else was in awe, Jalen, who was staring at the computer, suddenly noticed the email was sent by Kira. He was slightly stunned and looked at Luca surprisingly. "This solution is it's from Kira. She gave it to me last Friday, but I didn't check it out because it was the end of the working day." At Luca's words, all the team members looked at Kira in disbelief. How could this be? They had been wrestling with this problem for a month. Was it really cracked by this young woman standing in front of them? Last Friday, she just started the job. Kira stood there quietly, exuding an aloof and indifferent aura. Amazement seemed to emerge from her eyes, and she asked indifferently, "So, this is the problem you've been wrestling with?" Everyone was dumbfounded. Why did they feel like the words, "That's it," were written all over her face? Everyone swallowed, still finding it hard to believe. "Aren't you just an undergraduate?" Hearing these words, Kira said seriously, "Abilities aren't determined by educational qualifications." Everyone sobered up for a moment. After a moment of silence, someone spoke up. "I'm sorry for treating you that way in the elevator. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said you were earning without working. You alone did what our whole team couldn't do. I said you should learn from me, but I was really overestimating myself. You wouldn't learn anything from us with your skills. We belittled you. Everyone here was a simple-minded researcher. Kira knew clearly that these people only treated her that way before out of frustration. She said lightly, "It's okay." Jalen slowly walked toward her, still looking arrogant. Clenching his jaw, he extended his hand to her. "Welcome to the team." Initially, she was forcefully squeezed into the team due to her connections, but now he had recognized her capabilities. Clap, clap, clap. There was suddenly applause at the door. Everyone turned their heads to see the research department's director and a dark-faced Jake walk in. The director of the research department said, "Young people today shouldn't be underestimated. I didn't expect Miss Olson's professional abilities to be so strong." Jake stared at Kira, his eyes full of complicated emotions. He certainly knew about Kira's talent in academic fields. His affection for her over the years wasn't entirely due to her looks, but he didn't expect her to be able to solve the team's core technical problem. Such a talent would definitely fly high if given the opportunity to further her studies. Her future achievements might not be inferior to Drive South, but that was in the future. In the short term, Drive South was beyond her reach. Jake clenched his fists, his gaze gradually becoming determined. He desperately needed to control the research department and consolidate his position at the Horton Group. He had no time to wait for her growth. Moreover, she was an illegitimate daughter. He couldn't possibly marry her, considering her status or capability. Suppressing the hesitation, he glared at Jalen in a sinister manner. "I was actually considering letting Drive South help you if you couldn't finish the task in time." The team members' eyes widened at the words. My God, Drive South. Receiving guidance from Drive South or working with him would be my ultimate dream. If I could meet Drive South, I'd rather remain single for life. Listening to the reactions of the crowd, Jalen replied with a hardened face, "We won't bother Drive South with such trivial issues." However, Jake said, "Drive South is basically our technical support. It would be right for him to lend a hand." Kira frowned slightly upon hearing this. She clearly refused Isla. How did she become the technical support for the Horton Group? Looking at Jake's confident demeanor, Isla must have lied again. Jake narrowed his eyes and continued, "Jalen, actually, I happen to need an assistant who knows the technique, so I considered adjusting Kira's position. You and I are both core members of the research department. There's no need to be at odds. As long as you agree, I'll arrange for Drive South to provide technical support to you right away." He said this on purpose, just to let the members of Group 1 know that as long as they gave up Kira, he could get them in touch with Drive South. The attraction of Drive South to these researchers was too great. Group 1's members would certainly oppose Jalen's decision. Kira's face darkened as well, feeling extremely irritated by Jake. She looked at the staff members on the team and saw their faces change. They understood the implications. Everyone exchanged glances, all with indecisive expressions on their faces. Kira's eyes dimmed. She just started working a few days ago. Although the team members were good to her last week, they'd only known her for a day and a half. Jake looked at the expressions of Team 1's members, knowing that his scheme to stir up strife was working. Therefore, he continued, "Jalen, do you agree to let her go now? In fact, letting Kira follow me will be better for her future." Jalen grimaced and firmly replied, "No." Kira blinked, a little surprised. Jake chuckled. "Our company has always been very democratic. You can't be the only one to decide on the team's matters. If you don't let her go, do the other members agree? Does the team really not need Drive South?" After he said this, everyone on the team immediately fell silent. Jalen stood up straight, looking angrily at the team members. Kira suddenly laughed. She didn't want to reveal her identity initially to avoid being harassed, but now she didn't want to go through any unnecessary tests of humanity either. She looked directly at Jake and said coldly, "Did you ask for my consent before using Dr. South as a bargaining chip? Why should I ask you?" Jake sneered. "Kira, this is a personnel change within the Horton Group. Your opinions are irrelevant. What about Drive South's opinion?" Kira's tone was very light, with a hint of mockery in her expression. Jake was taken aback. What does Drive South's opinion have to do with you? Could she know Drive South? The smile on Kira's lips grew colder. I am. Before she could say the words drive south, Luca suddenly stepped forward, blocking her way, till followed Jalen's instructions. Kira's pupils contracted in shock as she looked at Luca. The other members of the team also laughed and chimed in. Yes, we'll follow Jalen's instructions. Kira looked incredulously at the team members. Just half an hour ago, they were attacking her for not working effectively, but now they were unequivocally standing with her. Jake wasn't just a deputy head of the R&D department, but he was also the legitimate grandson of the Horton family. Once his power became invincible, how could these people, who had enraged him, continue to work at Horton Group? But they weren't considering this at all. Kira's throat tightened, and there was a smile in her eyes. Jake's face grew even uglier. He suppressed his anger and sneered. It seems that the pressure of R&D on you all isn't as much as I thought, hence the lack of need for Drive South's help. In that case, I presume the final task of this project wouldn't be much of a challenge for you all. Have the solution submitted by the end of this Friday. The entire project timeline was divided into 2 parts, with teams 1 and 2 responsible for 1 part each. The biggest challenge of the project was to perfectly integrate these 2 parts. Handing over this task to Group 1 was an issue. Jalen could certainly solve the problem in a couple of months. However, Jake had only given them a week. Jalen protested angrily. This is totally unreasonable. Jake simply retorted, if Drive South would do it, it would be solved in 3 days. You don't need Drive South's help because you think you're great, right? 1 week is more than enough. Having left those words, he turned and left. Kira's eyes darkened slightly. She followed him out of the office and said, "Shall we talk?" Jake narrowed his eyes, and the two went into the corridor outside. Kira looked at him. Care to make a bet? The sudden proposition made Jake feel bewildered. He was reminded of his senior year in college, when he had also used this method to pursue her. He had said to her, "Kira, do you dare bet? Let's see who finishes their graduation thesis first. The one who loses must grant the winner a request." She had looked at him in a way that suggested that she found him childish, but she eventually nodded in agreement. He had stayed up several nights in a row to complete his thesis successfully. When he went to find her, he proposed to gift her something at the graduation ceremony, which she shouldn't refuse. But in the end, that gift was never given. She was an illegitimate daughter. This rendered his 4 years of pursuit seemingly pathetic. Jake's expression gradually turned contemptuous as he looked at Kira. "Why should I bet with you?" Kira goaded him on. "Are you afraid of losing to me again?" Jake was startled. Again, Kira took out her phone, opened her email, and handed it to him. "I won last time." Jake looked at the time of the email on her phone, only to find out that she submitted her thesis the day after they made their bet. He narrowed his eyes. Only then did he realize that he had never caught up to her pace. His male ego couldn't stop him from asking, "What's the bet?" Kira slowly said, "If Group 1 can submit the solution before the end of this Friday, and Drive South has yet to provide you with a solution, then you will never interfere with Group 1's work again." She wasn't going to stay here for a long time, so she wanted to help her colleagues in Group 1 resolve their future concerns. Jake sneered, "If you guys don't hand it in, but Drive South provides me with a solution, you'll have to follow my orders from now on." "Deal." Jake looked at her decisive demeanor and couldn't help but ask, "Kira, I know you're excellent in your field, but what makes you think you can beat DR South?" Kira sneered. "Do you really think that Drive South is going to help you solve the problem? Did he promise you in person that he would serve as technical support for Horton Group?" Jake was taken aback. Kira didn't pay him any more attention. She went back to Group 1 in the R&D department, only to find everyone sighing. When they saw her, they quickly exchanged glances and intentionally started making comments. Meeting Drive South isn't really that exciting. He's a high and mighty god. Even if we meet him once, it's not like we'll be instantly enlightened. Yes, if I meet him once, will my IG increase to 250? Kira, don't worry. This project is so challenging. Even if we can't complete it, what can Jake do to us? 2-2. Even Jalen coughed loudly and roared. "Enough. Can't you see that new work has been assigned? What are you all gossiping about here? Get to work. Meet me in the conference room. We're redistributing the tasks. Coming. Kira watched as everyone rushed into the conference room, then casually sauntered in after them. Jalen seemed to be waiting for her. Only after she entered did he start distributing the tasks. At the end of the day, Kira thought everyone would need to work overtime, but surprisingly, everyone packed their things and left. Kira, with her laptop in hand, headed for the underground parking lot. She didn't notice that after she left, all of her colleagues from Group 1 who had already left returned to work overtime. In the underground parking lot, inside a Bentley, Tom asked, "Boss, shall we go?" "There's no rush," Lewis said lightly, still holding a thick book in his hand. Tom was just about to ask who he was waiting for when he saw Kira approaching and getting into the car. Only then did Lewis look up. "Let us go." Tom was dumbfounded. Was Lewis waiting for Miss Olson to leave together? The car drove smoothly along the road. Kira looked at Lewis and glanced at the book in his hands, intending to borrow it for reference. But remembering her work, she decided to wait and borrow it 3 days later. The two of them didn't say anything on the way back and quickly returned to the hospital. Just as they reached the VIP ward area on the 3rd floor, they could hear Poppy's loud voice. "Mrs. Horton, I came especially to see you." "What a pleasure." Old Mrs. Horton blocked the entrance to the ward, glaring at Poppy. "Get out. If you don't leave, I'll have someone beat you up." Poppy forced a smile, playing the part of a haggler. "I'm Kira's mother. You love Kira the most, don't you? You shouldn't treat me like this for her sake. You are not her mother." Old Mrs. Horton was adamant. "Mrs. Olson is her mother." At this statement, Poppy broke out into a cold sweat and shot back. "How do you know?" Poppy was terrified. Only she and her brother, Finley, knew about her switching the girls. She had never mentioned it to her real daughter, Isla. How could old Mrs. Horton know? Moreover, she spoke in an assertive tone, not of suspicion, but of certainty. Seeing Kira and Lewis approaching, Poppy looked even more uneasy in her guilt. They hadn't heard what she'd just said, had they? Old Mrs. Horton huffed out. "I know. You bullied my granddaughter-in-law. You're a bad woman." The old lady rambled on and on. It seemed like something was wrong with her mind. Poppy breathed a sigh of relief. She approached Kira with the thermos in hand. "Kira, dear, I brought you some chicken broth. You must be tired from caring for old Mrs. Horton. You need to eat more to regain some strength." The aroma of the chicken broth from the thermos wafted into the air, but to Kira, it was nothing more than irony. This was the first time Poppy had ever made soup for her. She asked in a voice devoid of emotion, "What do you want?" Poppy smiled. "I'm still after Isla's 2% share. Old Mrs. Horton values you a lot. She helped you arrange a hospital room for Mrs. Olson and get you that medicine. She'll definitely agree if you ask for it. Help out your sister, otherwise, how could she be confident around Jake?" Kira's expression turned ice cold, the words escaping her lips devoid of warmth. "No." Poppy's face hardened, her facade crumbling. She glared at Kira. "That's right, huh? I worked so hard to give birth to you. You climbed the social ladder, and now you won't respect me anymore." She plopped down on the ground, crying out, "If you don't help me today, I won't get up. Everyone, come look at this. My daughter is an ungrateful wretch. She's embarrassed by her mother's lowly background, so she's serving old Mrs. Horton with such dedication. She wants to be their granddaughter now." The surrounding medical staff and patients began to whisper among themselves. "Miss Olson seemed nice. I never expected her to be like this. She's so materialistic. She's even denying her own mother. I've never seen anything like this in my life." Kira stood there with an expressionless face. She truly didn't want to admit that this woman causing a scene was her mother. Yet regretfully, such a relationship was impossible to sever. She felt helpless. Kira sneered, her voice as icy as her expression. "Go ahead, make a scene. If you interrupt anyone's rest, the security will escort you out." After she finished speaking, she walked past Poppy. Poppy was enraged. "Ungrateful wretch. Little slut." Out of spite, she stood up abruptly and threw the thermos full of chicken soup roughly at Kira. "Watch out." Kira heard a deep voice. Then she was tightly enveloped in a sturdy embrace. She looked back in surprise. only to see Lewis standing protectively in front of her, shielding her from the scalding hot chicken soup with his broad back. Steam was rising from his black suit. Kira gasped and asked anxiously, "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." He squinted at Poppy. Poppy was petrified. She waved her hands frantically. "Mr. Horton, I didn't mean to splash you. I. She was so flustered that she turned to escape, quickly disappearing from the corridor. No one paid her any heed as everyone circled around Lewis to enter their wards. The old lady immediately rushed over, quickly stripping off Lewis's clothes. "Quickly, take it off and let me see how bad it is. Are there any blisters?" Lewis calmly took off his suit and white shirt, revealing his sturdy chest. Kira instinctively wanted to look away, but not before her gaze fell onto his back, which was now bright red and full of blisters. That wasn't a minor injury. It was clearly very serious. "Oh my, does it hurt?" "Kira, apply some ointment for him." The old lady snatched the burn cream from the nurse's hand and thrust it into Kira's hands. She pushed Kira behind Lewis, then beckoned to the others to leave the room. "Let's not crowd around here. The brat will be embarrassed to be naked." Then, moving closer to Kira, she whispered, "Granddaughter-in-law, it's up to you now." Kira was speechless. In an instant, only the two of them were left in the ward. It was so awkward. Lewis said in a low voice, "This is my grandma's whimsical thinking. I'll let the nurse come in. I'll do it." Kira interrupted him and walked behind him. It was the twilight hour, and the golden light spilled in through the window, casting long shadows of the two. Lewis stood before the window, the halo through the glass illuminating his broad back, and his fitted trousers outlined his slender waistline. One look, and Kira lowered her gaze. It was as if a tiny stone had been thrown into the lake of her heart, causing ripples to spread outward. She dabbed the ointment on her fingertips before gently applying it to his burned area. Lewis remained silent, his muscles tensing subconsciously the moment her fingertips touched his skin. Her faint breath sprayed onto his back like a flame was scorching him. Noticing his discomfort, Kira asked softly, "Does it hurt?" Lewis lifted his eyes, and in the reflection of the window, he could see her expression, which was serious and focused, as if she were handling a priceless antique. His attention was drawn to her, and the corner of his mouth twitched slightly. "No, it doesn't hurt." A moment later, having applied the ointment, Lewis put on a new shirt and buttoned it up. "Thank you, Miss Olson. Don't mention it." Kira hesitated, then looked up at him. "Actually, you didn't have to take the hit for me. If you get hurt, your grandmother would be devastated. If you get hurt, my grandmother would be even more devastated. Well, after all, I'm an outsider." His dark eyes fixed on her, and he said slowly, "You forgot. You're now my wife." Kira's breathing quickened, the air around her seeming to thin out due to Lewis's words. Her heart skipped a beat, and her eyelashes fluttered like a fan. "I'm going out for a bit." Kira turned to leave the room. Lewis asked, "What are you going to do?" "Take revenge." It didn't matter how Poppy treated her, but if she had hurt Lewis, she couldn't just let it go. Kira went to Mrs. Olson's room, intending to check if Poppy was there. But just as she got close, she spotted Isla and a man disappearing into the corridor. The man was slimy and sneaky. It looked a lot like Uncle Finley. Out of curiosity, Kira followed them. In the corridor, Finley was rubbing his hands together. "My dear niece, your uncle is a bit short on cash." Isla suppressed her anger. "I've already given you my pocket money for this month." Finley was her nightmare. Without warning, he came to her on New Year's Day and said that she was Poppy's daughter. He demanded money from her, threatening to reveal the truth to Taylor and Mrs. Olson. Despite her pleas, Finley remained unfazed. He smiled and said, "Either way, I can't survive without money. If you won't give it to me, I'll go to Kira and tell her the truth. She would definitely give me a large sum of money." At that moment, the door was pushed open. Kira stood there, her back against the light. Her voice was cold. "What truth?" Kira suddenly appeared, startling Isla. She immediately looked at Finley with panic written all over her eyes. Finley flashed a faint smile, about to speak. Isla beat him to it. "Kira, What are you doing eavesdropping on our conversation? Kira's gaze swept over her and Finley. Don't deflect the topic here. She looked at Finley. What truth? Kira's intuition told her that this truth had something to do with her. She added, I can give you money for it. Finley's eyes lit up. How much can you give? Kira looked at Isla and saw her clutching her clothes tightly, completely flustered. She said indifferently, just name your price. I can get it from the Horton family. Finley's shifty little eyes flitted about, finally settling on Isla with a beaming smile. I think you're not as rich as Isla, right? Isla immediately heaved a sigh of relief and told Finley, I'll find a way to get you the money you want. You can leave now. Finley chuckled. All right then. See you around. As he passed by Kira, he paused. Niece, my secret will always be valuable to you. As long as you can afford the price, I'll definitely sell it to you. With those words, he cheerfully left. Kira watched him leave, narrowing her eyes. She took out her phone and sent a message to Samuel on WhatsApp. Check out Finley. Samuel quickly replied, Okay. He then sent another message. Boss, there's an industry gathering tomorrow. The invitation is in your email. Are you going? Kira's reply was very brief. No. After sending the message, when she looked up again, she saw Isla walking past her with her head lowered. Kira calmly said, If you don't want people to find out, you shouldn't do anything in the first place. You think I can't find out about you and Finley? Isla froze, then looked up with a smile on her face. Kira, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't understand. No wonder despite being Miss Olsen, you're so strapped for cash. You're paying him every month. How big of a secret do you owe him? Isla quickly retorted, What nonsense are you talking about? How could I owe him any secret? Her eyes flashed with a ruthless gleam. Kira, I suggest you better figure out your own way out instead of wasting time on me. Kira's face turned cold. Seeing Isla about to leave, she asked, Where's Poppy? Upon hearing this, Isla instantly flared up. That's your mother. How would I know? Isla had been hiding the truth from Poppy after finding out from Finley, pretending that she didn't know at all. That woman was too foolish. She feared that acknowledging Poppy would lead to Poppy revealing any clues. Therefore, Poppy had no idea that Isla already knew the truth about her roots. Leaving those words behind, Isla left. Kira followed her, eventually arriving at Mrs. Olsen's ward. Through the glass window on the door, it was evident that Poppy wasn't inside the room. Kira didn't go in to disturb Mrs. Olsen. Instead, she left the building. She called Poppy, Where are you? A panic-stricken voice came from Poppy's end. Kira, what are you trying to do? I want you to come back and apologize to Mr. Horton. The voice of Poppy suddenly grew shrill. I won't. Mr. Horton won't let me off the hook. You apologize to him for me. You're my daughter, and a daughter should pay for the mother's debt. Kira scoffed. In that case, don't blame me for calling the police. Poppy roared. Why would you call the police? I'm your mother. The person I try to hit is you. A mother has every right to hit her child. Kira remained indifferent. But this time the person you injured is Mr. Horton. Everyone has to pay for their own mistakes. You ungrateful thing. If I had known this is how you treat me, I should have drowned you when you were born. I should have thrown you into a manure pit or sold you to a brothel. You little slut. Kira didn't bother to listen to her any longer. She simply hung up. Regardless of their past conflicts, calling the police would only lead to a verdict of a family dispute. But this time it was different. Poppy accidentally injured Lewis and was eventually sentenced to 48 hours in custody, in addition to a fine and medical fees. But the Horton family wouldn't care about that amount of money. Having dealt with these matters, Kira returned to old Mrs. Horton's hospital room. Lewis wasn't in the room. The old lady explained. He mentioned something about an important meeting and left for it. He's downstairs in the car. Kira nodded. She was silent for a moment, and then she spoke. Granny, I'm sorry. But the old lady waved her off. We're all family here, and there's no need for such formalities. Besides, seeing that brat sticking up for you made me rather pleased. Kira was slightly taken aback. Family. In this bustling world that was filled with people coming and going, she had always known that she didn't have a family. But now, it seemed like she truly had a sense of home. Isla sold a bag in the second-hand market and gathered $10,000 to give Finley. She also sent him a message. Keep your mouth shut. Otherwise, it won't end well for either of us. Finley's response arrived quickly. Niece, don't worry. Even if I can't tell who's richer between you and Kira, I still know who to side with. Isla was still uneasy. She needed to marry Jake as soon as possible. That way, even if her identity was exposed in the future, she would still be the daughter-in-law of the Horton family. At 9 in the evening, Jake suddenly came to look for her. Isla was excited. Jake, why are you here? Jake asked sternly. Regarding Drive South, are you sure you've settled things with him? Kira's words from earlier left Jake feeling uneasy. Isla hesitated, of course. Then arrange a meeting between me and Drive South. Isla anxiously wrung her hands. Drive South is currently abroad. I'll arrange it when he comes back. Jake, do you have any problems you need help solving? I can contact him for you. Jake watched Isla suspiciously. My questions are sent to your email. Send them to Drive South. Have him help solve the problem. Okay, I'll forward them right away. To prove her point, Isla immediately sent the email. Drive South usually responds to my messages instantly. Jake, just wait a moment. In the VIP hospital ward, Kira's phone vibrated once. She took a glance and saw that it was an email from Mrs. Olson. South, can you help me solve this problem? Kira guessed what was happening. She opened the attachment, which indeed contained a technical issue from the Horton Group. Isla was actually asking for her help under the guise of Mrs. Olson. Kira let out a scoff and replied to the message. Ding! The email alert chimed, and Isla breathed a sigh of relief. See, Drive South responds quickly to me. I received his email. Then, Isla opened the email. Enhance.